Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the ACCA enrichment session for our paper Advanced Financial Management. I hope you guys are doing well. Now, these enrichment sessions is all about preparing you for your upcoming September exam session. If this is your first time joining the enrichment session, welcome on board. My name is Joanne, the Manager Learning Support for ACCA Malaysia. Together with me this afternoon is our ACCA tutor guru, Mr. Alan Lynch. Now, Alan has 10 years of teaching experience and has helped students pass their ACCA papers worldwide. Now, before I hand over the floor to Alan, let me just run through quickly with you all on the housekeeping item. Yeah? If you have any questions during the session, please use the Zoom control panel chat box at the bottom of the screen and select send to all panelists attendees so that others can see and benefit from the comments and questions you have. So remember, don't be shy. Feel free to ask any burning questions you have relating to the subject in the chat box, and Alan will address your questions live throughout the session. So we really should begin as there's a lot to cover for the session today. So now I will now pass the session to Alan. Alan, over to you now.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. It's early in the morning for me, but that's okay. It's afternoon for you, so you're all awake and full of energy, I'm sure, and ready to go. So first of all, I'm going to share my screen if I can. Let me see. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through a quick presentation for a few minutes, but we're going to spend most of the time talking about, we're going to spend most of the time going through exam questions. And I'm going to take you through exam questions step by step today. And I'll talk about those in a few minutes. So if you do have any questions as I go through the slideshow, just put them in the chat box. And what I'll do is I'll go through all those questions then at the end of these slides. And hopefully I'm answering a lot of your questions or your concerns while we go. So as I mentioned, today we're doing AFM today, and we're going to have a look at the March-June 2021 exam paper. And I think what's important is that we never have any way of guessing what's going to come up in the exam, and we're not trying to. So whether you do the March-June paper or whether you do a paper the year before, don't ever try and second guess the examiners, especially on AFM. Because you might be right by chance sometimes, but most of the time you're not going to be. So today is not about understanding every little part of each topic. Today is more about you concentrating on that exam technique. And I'm sure some of you on this call have had the misfortune of getting 48 or 49 in an ACCA exam. And if you get anywhere in the 40s, it's more than likely that your issue is with exam technique and not with the knowledge that you have and not with the amount of work that you've been putting in. So today is about exam technique points that you can use, that when we're going through the questions, you should be seeing things maybe that you've never seen before, you've never done before, or maybe you realize that, oh, you've done things the wrong way and you're making life more difficult for yourself. So we'll be concentrating on exam technique most of the time. But we're going to also have a look at examiner feedback, because the examining team did release the question or their feedback recently. So I would ask that you have a copy of the questions and of the solutions if you want, but more of the questions that you were sent out, because I can't share both on screen when we're doing the questions. And I think Joanna's going to put the links up at some point on the chat as well. So I have a quick poll. I have a few poll questions to ask you. So the first one, and this is much out of my curiosity and to see what you guys think. The first question is that AFM is mainly a calculation-based exam. And I'm curious what people think. And it's unusual here because most of you are disagreeing with that and saying it's not mainly a calculation-based exam. And that's a really good place to start, because in a lot of students strongly believe that it's mainly calculation. So that's a really good start, guys, because I think it's good that you certainly understand the exam. So the pass rate in ACCA for AFM was 39% in June. So you're saying for every 10 people doing the exam, only 4 people are passing. And it's been lower and it's been higher and it moves around. So again, I just have a second poll, very simple question. And what I'm asking for here is wondering, why do you think the AFM pass rate is so low? So you have a choice between questions are too hard, time management, or other. And there could be lots of reasons why you might think that it's too hard. And again, I think the predictable thing coming in here is time management. And that realization that time management is important today will really help you with that, I hope. And time management is key to this exam. Time management and exam technique. I do appreciate that the questions are too hard, and I think that the whole thing with doing the ACCA AFM exam is that when the questions are hard, you have to learn to continue on and kind of leave those hard questions behind you and concentrate on the areas that you can do. Okay, now now we're going to look at why. So we've looked at why the pass rates are so low. Just some wording from an examiner, and this is from an examiner's report last year, and it's really good wording about what the examiner, and this is what is expected of you. So this is what you should be able to think about when you're studying. So candidates are required to demonstrate their ability to read and quickly digest comprehensive and detailed questions. I think we know that. I actually think using the online format of doing the exams makes AFM a little bit easier to read and digest, and we'll talk about that later. Apply relative knowledge and skills, and apply is key. So if you're learning, if you're trying to remember the content from AFM, you're really going down the wrong path. It's applying your knowledge. Exercise professional judgment. That's expected of somebody in a senior financial advisor role. Forget about the role. Exercise professional judgment is key. And recommending or making financial management decisions that are likely to affect the entire business organization. There is very rarely an AFM question or AFM solution that you undertake that you don't make a recommendation. So in every single question that you take for AFM, you should be making some kind of a recommendation. You should be giving some kind of advice. And if you're not doing that, you've addressed the question wrong. So just I've only got two more of these polls. We won't be doing them for too much longer. And the next one is, I practice exam questions within time limits suggested for an exam. So 1.8 marks per minute. So what I'm saying here is that you strictly sit and you practice questions. And if it's a 10-mark question, you say 18 minutes, and then you're very strict with that. And again, that is part of the exam technique. And you have to, if late last night for me, which was probably during your day yesterday, I watched, or early morning for you, I watched the marathon in the Olympics. And the difference is that the people who are training for the marathon didn't just decide to run that fast last night for the first time. They have been practicing. They have been putting themselves in as many situations similar to that in the past. And again, that's what exam practice is. It's not just to practice the questions themselves. It's to put yourself in the position as much as possible that makes it feel like an exam. Okay, so there are a list of common issues in AFM, and they have pretty much been the same list of issues in AFM for years, to be quite honest. And the examining team keep going back and examining the same issues, and they keep raising the same issues. So what are they? Well, one of the biggest issues in AFM is people forget about financial management. So some of you will have done financial management as part of your applied skills. Some of you will have got exemptions because you have done financial management or covered those topics maybe in college or university. It is really important. The basic skills for AFM are part of financial management. And if you don't have those basic skills, because AFM starts at a certain level, it doesn't introduce topics. It continues on from where financial management ends. So you need to have those basic calculation skills from financial management. And if you are struggling with calculations in AFM, it's probably because you don't have maybe that basis properly from financial management, then you need to go back and work in those areas. Question 1 is often well attempted. People jump straight in. It's 50 marks. It's seen as the biggest part of the exam. All of the energy is put into that. And the problem is most people spend much more time on question 1 than they should. And then it's a race, and then it's a struggle, and then you're chasing yourself. There's more than one topic per subject area. And it's all about how the subjects interact. And we'll see today from the questions we're going to do, there's multiple subjects in a question. And there's a uniqueness in every question because they interact in different ways. Your discussion and evaluation must relate to the scenario. You have been presented a problem in every AFM question. You have been presented some kind of case study, an exhibit, something about a company. Everything you answer must be addressing what you've been told in the exam paper. It can't be general. It can't be here are the 5 benefits of this tool or that tool. That's irrelevant. It has to be related to the information you've been provided. And if it's not related to that, no matter how well written it is, you will not get marks in this exam. Professional marks are not just for layout. And there's this feeling that if I put some nice headings in, I'll get my professional marks. And you should really ignore where the professional marks go. You should ignore the fact that in the paper they'll say, oh, 4 professional marks go for part C in question 1, or whatever it might be. Your aim should be as professional as possible throughout the paper. Because if you're being professional throughout, you're writing better, you're writing more concisely, you're making it easier for the examiner. And you make it easier for the examiner to read, it's easier for the examiner to give you marks. So always keep the examiner in your head. Always imagine, well, what would I do if I was presented with my answer? Would I think that's a good answer? Would I think it's easy to follow? Would I think it's well laid out? And we will look at all layouts later on. Not answering the question asked. Still the biggest issue probably in every ACCA paper, not just AFM, that people pick up the paper, they catch some keywords and they write everything they know about those keywords, but they actually miss out on the question. Not taking a balanced approach, and as I said, it was great to see you guys earlier on being aware of the fact that AFM is probably 45% of the marks goes for discussion and 55% roughly goes for numerical, but that can change around. So you could more or less say it's 50-50. And your narrative answers, your discussion-based answers are so important for this exam. Not answering the questions for the marks available. So there's no point in writing 15 lines of text for 2 marks. And you don't write 2 lines of text for 15 marks. So you really, and that comes back to the time management. When you're doing a question, you have to look at the amount of marks. And the amount of marks should provide you a guide about what you're going to answer. And I'm going to go through many of those examples today. But be very aware, time management is usually caused by the fact that the amount of marks that you're being given, and the effort to get to those marks, there's a mismatch there. And finally, and I mentioned it earlier, but it's always worth mentioning again, it's knowledge, not memory. It's not about what you remember, because you can't apply what you remember, because if you don't understand it, if you don't understand what the techniques are, if you don't understand why you're doing something, you can't apply it to a case study. So it's about, I would always say to students, get a sheet of paper, write the word understand on it, and stick it over the desk or whatever you study. Because it's not about you remembering anything, it's about you understanding. So let's have a look at a few things and I want to put some things in your head for when we're talking later on and we're going through questions. So there's no marks for mentioning topics. There's no marks for guessing. You have to apply things exactly as requested. Beware of marking for volume and effort. And we talked about that. And again, I will repeat myself in some things. And the reason why I'm repeating myself is that students are still making these errors in exams over and over again. And if you think about it, if you can get rid of 1 or 2 of these things that you do that you shouldn't do, that can make a huge difference in the amount of marks that you have. Repeating the scenario or listing the content in the question. These examiners are very clever people. They will know that you've basically just rewritten the scenario in a different way. You won't get marks for that. You don't get marks for volume. You don't get marks for writing lots. It's all about the content. You don't get marks for regurgitating knowledge. If it's not applied correctly, you just won't get marks. You receive marks for a good answer, but not answering the question asked, but answering your version of the question. Doesn't matter how well written it is, how amazing it is. If it's not addressing the question, you don't get marks for that. And remember, what you submit in your exam, that's all the examiner knows about you. They don't know how hard you've been working. They don't know that you've been slaving away night times and weekends and while you're working and at lunch times or early mornings. They don't know how stressed you are. They don't know how hard it was. They know nothing about that. They're not judging you at all. The only judgment, the only thing they have to look at you is your exam paper. And you have to make sure that's the best version of yourself. You have to make sure that you are showing the best layout, the best well-written, time management, that you've answered all the questions, that you have shown that you have read the paper, that you understand what the examiner has asked, and you are trying your best to give them what they're looking for. And that's all an examiner is. And every ACCA examiner wants to pass people. And people think sometimes, oh, ACCA have targeted pass rates, or they have there's an amount of people they have to fail. And there are lots of myths about this. But I'm telling you now, no examiner likes to fail students. It's just, nobody feels good about failing. So every examiner opens an exam paper wanting to pass the next student. I promise you that. You just have to give them as many reasons to pass as you possibly can. So what are the things you should know before attempting your exam? Well, you have to know the course. And I know that sounds easy, and I know it's a big course, but you have to know the course, and you have to know your assumed knowledge from financial management. Obviously, be aware of time management. It's a 3-hour and 15-minute exam. So you do have those. What I would always recommend is you have 15 minutes for planning and you have 3 hours for taking the exam. And you have to have a strategy going into the exam, and we will talk about that. A professional approach throughout. Imagine you are writing your exam paper is going to your boss or going to a future manager, or it's being presented to a real board. Make it the best version of what you can do, that it represents you. And use all the available resources. Read the articles that are on the ACCA website. And use the practice platform that they made available to students. So they are doing everything that the ACCA have put onto the AFM site. They have put there for a reason. So they have seen, oh, students are struggling with this. We need to give them a resource. So everything that they know students are struggling with, they have put resources on the site to help students, to help you. And if you use them properly, because they are the things that the examiners are saying, students aren't doing this well enough. So we are going to put something available to them to help them do it better. So anything that they put on the website, the examining team are basically saying to you, this is here because we want you to do it better, and doing it better gets more marks. So they are giving you plenty of hints and tips and guidance to your exam. So knowing the course, and there's a few areas that I would maybe concentrate on depending on time. You should really know the whole course, but company valuations, and when we're looking at in the context of mergers and acquisitions, and in fact, we'll look at a question on that today. Capital structure. There's another question in March-June paper involving capital structure, and then there's dividend policy. Knowing the course, so investment project appraisal, again, that came up today, or that will come up in the questions we look at today, and risk management and hedging decisions all came up. So what you will find with an AFM course is a lot of the content comes up again and again. The same type of topics come up, but the questions are so different and presented in so much detail that it's not about guessing. I know what subjects are coming up. I could tell you what's going to come up in September, but I couldn't tell you which way it's going to come up. I couldn't tell you whether it's question 1 or 2. I couldn't tell you what subjects they're going to merge together. So don't try and guess. Don't spend your time second guessing the examiner. Spend your time getting ready to manage whatever the examiner throws you in your way. So we're going to do another one. This is always my favorite question. And it's, I have taken or plan to take a mock exam. And answer this honestly. Nobody's, okay. So the vast majority of you are taking a mock exam. I will say that's a very high number and it's great. And I do hope you will take a mock exam. And remember the thing about a mock exam, that the most important thing about a mock exam is that it's not that, a mock exam is not about your mark. What's key about a mock exam is actually doing it to the proper amount of time and the feedback you get on it. So if you get a pass mark in a mock exam, don't get overexcited. And if you fail it, don't get too downhearted. It's all about the feedback you get. It's all about what you could do better. It's all about what you have learned. I know it's hard not to, I know it's hard to ignore a mark, but don't read too much into a mark. The only exam you have to pass is on the final day of the exam. So again, if you have any questions, do put them in the chat box and I will address them at the end of this. Time management. So, and just some quick tips, and I'm going to go through them later on when we do the questions. Identify the verbs and the requirements. So assess or evaluate. Read the question carefully and identify all the requirements. And the number one tip in an ACCA exam is start with the requirements. Know what they want you to do before you know anything else about the company. Okay? Assign appropriate time to each requirement. And you can't go into question 1 in AFM thinking it's 50 marks, I've got an hour and a half. You've got to be much more focused and break question 1 down even into more detail. And again, answer only what is asked. A professional approach, relevant and logical arguments. If you make relevant arguments and you make logical arguments, you will actually write less. This is not a writing competition. It's not about how much you can write, you get more marks. The less you write, but the more focused your response, the more marks you get, the easier the time will be, and you'll just do better in the exam. So don't be trying to over-explain things. They just want you to get to the point in a professional way. Remember, there's no one correct answer, especially when you're discussing, if you have calculated net present value or adjusted net present value, or today we're going to look at company valuations. There's no right or wrong interpretation. Once you have a relevant and logical argument, it's not whatever matches the examiner. So don't worry about, oh, what's the examiner looking for here? Think about a relevant and logical argument. Again, the 4 professional marks in the exam. If you've ever got 48 or 49 in an exam, you know how important 4 marks could be. But don't worry about where those marks are from. Be professional throughout. So what does a professional approach look like? A good answer layout, and I'm going to show you some of them today. An organized and systematic approach, and I'm going to give you an approach today that you can take for every single question. A good structure, neat, tidy, and not crowded. And especially when you're using the word processor now on the ACCA online system, there's no reason for crowding. You can't run out of space. You can't run out of paper. Make sure it looks nice. And then time management, possibly the most important, because sometimes people disagree that it is, but I think it's a lot of, it makes up most of your technique. You get that part right, everything else will flow. If you struggle with time management, everything else will fall by the wayside. You'll struggle with structure. You'll struggle to keep it neat because you'll be rushing. So what should you know before getting the exam? Well, here's an example here. So calculate and analyze the operating profit margin ratio using data provided in the scenario over a 3-year period. And here we say that 1 mark is available for the computation and 1 mark for the analysis. So provide the workings, show the numbers. If you say, well, I've calculated the margin and the profit margin has increased or the profit margin has decreased, you won't get marked for that. because your calculation is already done for that. What you have to do is when you calculate it, you note the accelerations, you give your opinion about what has happened. So stating what you've already calculated won't get you the marks. You have to add analysis. You have to add value to the numbers that you've calculated. So never give commentary on the numbers to say what the numbers are. Always give commentary and say, what are you adding to those numbers that's relevant? So why could this have happened? Every time you write a question in AFM in response to numbers you have calculated, why could this have happened? In my opinion, why could this profit margin have gone up or down like that over a 3-year period? What could have caused it? Okay, so I'm just going to jump in. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to jump in and see. So I know some people are putting up their hands, but I can't talk to you. So, so if you do have any questions, please just write them in the chat box and I will answer them as we go along. Okay, so they are the main comments so far, and that's really what we're going to concentrate on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go straight into questions. And there is a couple of things, and Joanne has put up information. So what's important here is on the chat box, in number 2 is the AFM March, June to 21 questions. And Joanne has given you the link for that, and I think you already got it sent out. So I would like you to have that beside you, because I'm going to use the ACCA system, but they don't have it available where the exhibits are there. So do that first and have that to one side. And what I'm going to do, especially with question 1, I'm going to take you through step by step. And we're going to spend a good bit of time going through the question. Now, you can ask any question you want. Absolutely, I'm here to answer any question. But what I don't want, what I try to avoid getting too in depth and saying, oh, where exactly did that number come from? Or because the same thing isn't going to happen again. And what's really important today is that you concentrate on your exam technique and your time management and how you do questions. A warning I would say to students, and again, I should have put this in a poll maybe, and maybe you can answer it in the chat, but no student from here on in, between now and the exam day, should ever use pen and paper to answer a question again. And I don't know whether you are or not, and I'd be curious if you are. So if you're using pen and paper, throw a yes in. If you're not, put a no in. But between now and the exam day, you should never answer questions with pen and paper. It's really, really important for exam technique that you practice using the system that's on the ACCA website. There's providers that offer it. Even if you use Excel and Word, or you use Google Sheets and Google Docs, it doesn't matter. But from now on, it's really important that you don't use pen and paper to answer questions. That you use some kind of online tool or computerized tool that best replicates the ACCA exam that you'll face on the day. And there's lots of reasons for that. And the main one is that you write and you type differently. And you need to learn how to type in an exam fashion. And a lot of people think, oh no, it's okay, I just type what I write, but it's not, and it's very different. There are also a lot of time-saving techniques and shortcuts that you can take in an exam using tools, but that's something you build up with experience. That's something you build up with time. So that's really important. So what we're going to have a look at first, and I will, is the scenario 1 requirements for the March, June 21 paper. So hopefully you've all had a chance to open that up, and we are going to have, and I'll put the requirements on screen and I'll talk you through them first. So what are the requirements? Well, for scenario 1, you have, it's your 50-mark question, and it's split out in a number of different sections. Now, section A, or part A, explain why a regulatory framework related to mergers and acquisitions is necessary to protect the interests of shareholders and other stakeholders. So there's a couple of questions in there. First of all, briefly explain what a regulatory framework is, why it protects the interests of shareholders, and why it protects the interests of stakeholders. So you're actually addressing 3 different points in that 5-mark question. So it's really important to understand what exactly the examiner is looking for you. They will expect you to explain the regulatory framework. They will expect you to explain how it's designed, how it protects the interests of shareholders, and how it protects the interests of other stakeholders, not how it protects the interests of both at the same time, because they are different motivations. So again, read these questions carefully. And again, by practicing questions, you start understanding what the examining team are looking for. The next part, and forget about exhibits right now. Don't even worry about looking at exhibits right now. The next part is part B. Discuss the 2 theoretical propositions as raised by Lala's board of directors in relation to the company's capital structure. So before even reading an exhibit, before even knowing anything about Lala's company, what do you know? You know you have 2 theoretical propositions. So you know you have 2 sections in your answer already. The minute you read this, you should be able to imagine what your question looks like. It's 2 sections. And you're going to be talking about the company's capital structure. So what you know about capital structure should already be coming to the forefront of your mind. Okay, I know it's about capital structures. I know nothing else, but I already know what my answer is going to be looking like. I know I'm going to have 2 distinct sections. I know I get 6 marks, so I'm going to get 3 marks for each area. I know 3 marks is kind of 3 good points in a narrative paragraph. I know I probably shouldn't write any more than 4 to 6 lines for each 3 marks. So already you should be seeing what your solution looks like in your head. And this should, with practice, this should just all happen in seconds. The very common part C, or the common big part, if you want to call it that, for AFM question 1, prepare a report for the board of directors of Lala company. So already prepare a report. A report has an introduction, a report has a conclusion, and a report has a number of sections in between. They're well titled, they're well described, they're well split out. So automatically, again, you should be seeing a report format in your head. What do you have to cover in that report format? Well, you have 3 sections here you have to cover. So now you know how your report is going to be split out. You're going to have a heading that covers subsection 1. You're going to have a heading that covers subsection 2. And you're going to have a heading that covers subsection 3. So the examining team are telling you how to lay out the report. They're telling you exactly, you do an introduction, you have 3 sections, and then you have a conclusion. So they're giving you all of this guidance in their requirements. You just have to know how to read them and understand them and take all those hints that they're giving you. So the report must estimate the value of each Kawa share if it is demerged and listed as an independent company, and that's worth 12 marks. So remember that 12 marks will include the calculation that you do, and it will also include the narrative that you write in the report. It also estimates in part 2. So you have your section 1, part 2, estimate the additional equity value created, combining Lala and Kawa, the percentage gain of each of Lala and Kawa's shareholder group under each payment method. And you already know what the payment methods are, and the impact of Lala capital structure under each payment method. And they will all come in the exhibits. And finally, evaluate the financial and other factors. So again, part 3 splits into 2. You have financial factors and you have other factors. So evaluate the financial and other factors that both Lala shareholders and Kawa shareholders. So if you think you have 4 sections, you have to evaluate the financial factors for Lala's and for Kawa shareholders. And then you have to evaluate the other factors for Lala's shareholders and for Kawa shareholders. So if you think about it, you've got 4 distinct parts you have to answer prior to agreeing the acquisition, and the impact on Lala's capital structure under each payment method. So you've actually got 5 things to address in part 3. And that makes it really easy, because if you think, okay, there's 11 marks. you can kind of say, well, I have 5 distinct points I have to make. And under those 5 distinct points, now I know that probably each of them are worth about 2 marks. So the examiner is really just asking me to write 2 to 3 lines on each of the things that they're looking for there. So that doesn't add up to much of a report. And then finally, professional marks for part C in the report format, structure, and presentation. So it's not just the layout, remember. It's how you put it together. It's your structure, it's your headings, but they've given you the layout in the requirements. So that's all pretty well covered. I'm just going to have a look before we go any further, and apologies for my bad pronunciations of names. It's not my strong point, but Mezara, hi Alan, do we get marks if we answer the theoretical questions in the Excel, not in the blank sheets that has been provided? So Mezara, what I would say, and I'm going to show you how you do both today, what I would say the best way of doing it is the way I do it today. The problem with answering the theoretical questions in the Excel file is that when the examiner opens up your exam, it can go all the way to the right and it makes it very difficult to read. And if it makes it difficult to read, it makes it difficult to mark. And if it makes it difficult to mark, you're at a disadvantage. So I'm going to show you today how what I think is the best way for you to do this. And I would urge you to try and adopt this style or your version of this style today. That will give you the best chance of passing. But I would be very against writing a lot of theory in Excel files. Johnny Lee, hi Alan, would like to ask for a report usually behind will have an appendix for all the working calculation. Is it necessary to use a spreadsheet for the workings and a Word for the report? Again, yes. I think you'll see today how you can really take advantage of the spreadsheet and the word processor. And if you use both of them for their strengths, your life will be a lot easier. Hi Alan, for 5 marks questions, it means that we need to write 5 points with an explanation. Jin, yes, Jin, it does, but it's what 5 points? So remember, it's not any 5 points. So if we look at the first requirement again, Jin, and anybody else who has the same question, you look at part A, explain why a regulatory framework is necessary to protect the interests of shareholders and other stakeholders. You have got 3 things you have to address. What is a regulatory framework? Why does it protect the interests of shareholders? And why does it protect the interests of other stakeholders? So yes, I would agree 5 points is plenty, but how do you split up those 5 points between the 3 different topics? And I will show you that in a second. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this question. Actually, sorry, what I'll do first is, now let's go through the exhibit, and I'm going to go through everything really slowly. And some advice, I guess, before we go through the exhibits. And then after we go through the exhibits, I'm going to show you what I think is the best way of setting up your question and when you're doing the exam, to use the online tool in the best way. You can use your own version of that, but again, there's some tips that that I would recommend, and I think I've done other videos that are on ACCA's website. They're probably on YouTube or whatever they are, and I would recommend you checking in with them every now and then to make sure that you're getting those tips right. So first of all, we're going to look at Exhibit 1, which is the introduction. Now, in previous exams before the online exam, question 1 was just 2 to 3 pages of text and you were going through it all. The introduction of the exhibits has actually made it easier, because what you will find is that most of the time, if not all of the time, but certainly most of the time, you will be able to match an exhibit to exactly which question you're being asked about. So you'll be able to say, oh, well, exhibit number 2 is for part B, exhibit number 3 is for part C, and so on. And that makes it much easier, because I guess with the paper exam, people weren't able to split that out as easily. And you saw, and you probably did it in exam, and I probably did it in my exams, that you're flicking back pages backwards and forwards. But actually, the way they've done it for the exams, and they've done that in a way so you're not having lots of windows open in your exam, it's really beneficial. So once you can identify which exhibit is mostly, if not all, related to the question you're attempting, you know all the information is right in front of you. And what you should be looking at doing is maximizing all that information that's available for you in front of you. And don't be jumping from exhibit to exhibit. That's really, really key. So exhibit number 1 was just an introduction. And to be honest, you read this introduction once and you probably never really come back to it again. But it's giving you that background information in your head. And you don't have to keep on reading it. It's just to give some background information that will help you with your commentary later on. So you're told Chakula is a large listed company involved in 2 business sectors. Its main business is in the production of food and drink for supermarkets and other large traders. It also owns a chain of coffee shops nationwide. The board of directors think that the company is undervalued, and in their opinion, it should focus on the rapid innovation taking place in the food and drinks production sector. Great. That's nice information to know. It's not going to have a massive impact on your question. It's just background, remember. Chakula's board of directors has decided to unbundle the coffee shops business into a company called Kawa. Chakula will then either demerge Kawa through a spin-off or sell Kawa. Chakula will then turn its full focus on the remaining business of food and drink production. Initially, Chakula shareholders will own Kawa on the basis of owning 1 Kawa share for every Chakula share owned by them. Lala is a large unlisted company controlled by 20 shareholders who all have significant stakes in the business. That's probably one of the key points now. So it's a large unlisted company and you're thinking, okay, what does an unlisted company mean? They don't have to diverge all of their financial information. The amount of public reporting is a lot less. The amount of public disclosures is a lot less. And again, that should just go through your head fleetingly. Keep it in the back of your mind for later on. Lala owns a number of hotels around the country and is looking to diversify into coffee retail business. Lala has approached Chakula about the possibility of purchasing Kawa. It will finance the purchase through a cash-only or share-for-share offer. So now you know you're going to be doing some calculations about cash-only purchases and share-for-share offers. If Kawa is demerged, it will be listed on the stock exchange as an independent company. Chakula is unsure whether to sell Kawa or Lala to Lala or to demerge it into an independent company. So your scene is set. Chakula have this business. They wanted to in some way move it from their company. They can demerge it, they can sell it, they can separately list it. There's a number of different things. So now you have that kind of framework. You're always addressing the board of directors. They are your customer, if you want to call them that. That is who you're providing advice to. So it's all about the board of directors. Now, here's where you get into the real detail. Okay. So further clarification has been sought by Lala's board of directors in the following 2 areas, and this is Exhibit 2. Lala's chief executive officer has determined that the regulatory framework in the areas of mergers and acquisitions is designed to protect the interests of shareholders and other stakeholders. That sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Well, it's the exact wording from Part A. So you know straight away, okay, Exhibit 2 is for Part A. That's all I need for Part A. I don't need to concentrate on anything else. The acquisition of Kawa will be a major investment for Lala, and its board of directors has concerned about how it will be financed. The board of directors heard there are several theories explaining capital structure of a company, including the following 2 propositions. A company should maximize its debt financing, and too much debt can be harmful to a company, and there needs to be a balance between equity and debt financing. And we do come back to that a little bit later. And again, what are the financial and other factors? That's where we come back to that one. So again, we should be able to point directly now to our exhibits. Now, exhibit number 3, this is where you get into the numbers. And again, this is your first look at the exhibits. This is not to spend too much time. You're not trying to manage it. What you're not doing at this stage is you're not writing. You are not writing at this stage. Now, you have all of these tools on your ACCA exam online when you can highlight and you can underline and you can do all of those things. I don't do those things. I don't see the benefit, to be quite honest. I think it's time consuming. I think it's distracting. I think you could end up highlighting the whole page. So again, that's up to you and what you do, because some people you may have a process, and that's fine, but be careful that your process isn't unnecessarily eating into time. Because although I spent a bit longer talking about it, at this stage, you're still probably in the first 3 to 5 minutes of your exam. So just be aware of the speed that you need to get to, and that only comes through practice. So you've got some extracts from the financial statements. You're told that the shares are trading at 245 each and have an equity beta. And again, you should start seeing the type of calculations that are coming up. The part of the business that will become Kawa's accounts for 24.5% of Shakula's total equity value. You're talked about, there's information about loan notes, that they have a market value of 2.1 billion. The loan notes currently have market value of 400 million. You know what the pre-tax cost of debt has been determined at 4.3% and 4.1% for each of the notes. After the unbundling, the loan notes will be serviced by Kawa, and the loan notes A will remain with Shakula. That the pre-tax cost of debt for both will increase by 0.3%. So when they uncouple, they're two smaller companies, so therefore their cost of debt will rise. It's expected that Kawa will maintain its capital structure after the unbundling. Lala's debt to equity ratio is 40 to 60. As equivalent market value terms, has 1.2 billion or 1,200 million shares in issue. The coffee retail industry is dominated by a company called Bunny Co. It's a large listed company which owns many coffee shops, and the average asset beta for the industry is 1.15. All companies pay corporation tax at a rate of 20% per year, and it's payable in the same years of profits it's based on, and that becomes important for cash flow statements later. And then the risk-free rate of return is estimated at 3%, and the market risk premium is 7.2%. So again, you're already looking at calculating equity and debt betas, because you're getting risk-free rates, you're getting market rates. So all of these things should be going through your head. This is where your brain should be automatically bringing these topics to the fore. You have so much going on in your head going into the exam. And this is the time when you kind of go, okay, I need that, I need that, I need that. And you're just beginning to think about these things. You're not getting too lost in the detail. You're still not writing solutions. You're still not getting carried away writing solutions. It's really important that you read these things properly. Now, Kawa as a demerged company, Shakula's sales revenue is 4.5 billion currently, of which 20% is attributable to Kawa. It's estimated that after it's demerged, its annual sales revenue growth will be 6%, and the profit margin before interest and tax will be 21% of sales revenue. So you're certainly looking at some kind of a cash flow type thing here for each of the next 4 years. It can be assumed that the current tax allowable depreciation will remain equivalent to the amount of investment needed to maintain the current level of operations, but the Kawa will require an additional investment in assets of 25 cents for every $1 increase in sales revenue. After the initial 4 years, the annual growth rate of the company's free cash flows is expected to be 2.5% for the foreseeable future. So again, we're doing a free cash flow evaluation. So again, it's really, and I know it's easy for me to say, I'm not doing this exam in September, but it is really important that you're getting into this mindset, and it can't just happen automatically on the day of the exam. This requires practice. And then finally, the last exhibit is the acquisition of Kawa by Lala. The following is estimated applies to the acquisition of Kawa by Lala. If Kawa company is acquired, you get a PE ratio for the industry, which is 15.61, and Lala's PE ratio is estimated to be 10% lower than this. You've extracts from the current profit and loss applicable to both companies. And then after the acquisition is expected, the PE ratio of the combined company will be the midpoint of the two individual companies' PE ratios. The annual after-tax profits will increase by 62 million due to combining the two companies. And Lala has proposed to pay for acquiring Kawa either through a cash offer of 66 cents for a Kawa share or 1 Lala share for every 3 Kawa shares. Lala will borrow the money needed to pay for the acquisition. So that's all of your exhibits. Okay. So you are probably here, you're probably now 5 minutes into the exam. Okay. So this is the point. If you think about what I said earlier, you've got 15 minutes for planning, and you've got 3 hours for writing the exam. So you're probably, obviously most of a good half of your planning is going to go into what you do for question 1. So now we're ready to do something. Now we're ready to pick up the proverbial pen, start using the keyboard, start using your mouse, and start putting something on your exam. Okay. Now, obviously, you won't have the piece of paper, so you will be opening, and I will look at that now. You will be opening the exhibits. So you all see now, this is something like you'll see on the day of the exam. And I'm not going to make this any bigger, because this is exactly what you see, and this is exactly what you face on the day. So I want to show you the best ways of doing this. Now, because this paper isn't available on this system right now, these exhibits are empty, and that's why I've been showing you through PDF. But the first things that you should do is open up your requirements, read them, and then read each of the exhibits. Okay, and again, just what we've done there now, see what ticks off in your head, but at no point do you start writing or doing anything. Okay. The next thing you do is you set up your layout that you want to work with. So what I have done here is I've set up a very basic layout, and this is just my preference. I have my Excel or my spreadsheet here, and I have my word processor here, but I can still click on any of these at any stage that I want to. Okay, and that's really important that you have access. Now, some people will say, oh, I need this down here because I need the calculator and I need the scratch pad and those things. It depends whether you want to use that or not. I am going to do this solution today using the spreadsheet to do all the calculations, because if you do that over time, it will be done quicker. If you're typing in all of the numbers and then you're using your calculator or the online calculator and calculating the numbers and just typing them in, you're just spending time doing something that's unnecessary, to be quite honest. Whereas you have a very good spreadsheet here. It will do all the calculations, and it won't make mistakes because of pressing the wrong number on your calculator because of panic. And you will see that when you're using the spreadsheet, there's a waterfall effect in an ACC exam, especially in AFM, that's something you calculate in the first part, then the answer goes down to the second part, then that answer goes down to the third part, and so on and so on. And information is gradually, and at the very end, you're nearly using the answer for each part that you calculated all together in order to get a final solution. Now, if you can get into that waterfall effect using the spreadsheet, you will save time, it will look better. And remember, the examiner, when they open up your page, sees all your formulas. So although you just have a solution there, the examiner has access that they see all of the formulas. So you can either type it in or you can use the formula, but I think the formula is much more efficient. And the reason why the formula is better as well, let's imagine you made a mistake in the very first calculation that has an impact on the whole of the rest of the question. And when you do a quick review at the end, you realize your mistake. It's a really simple mistake. It's changing a 4 to a 5 or whatever simple thing it might be. Now, if you have manually input all of those details, you have to go down and change everything. But if you have linked everything together, you just make your corrections the very first part and it will correct everything immediately. So I think it's the much easier way of doing it. I think it's a faster way of doing it. I think you have a tool that does a lot of the work on your behalf. It also looks neater and tidier, and it makes it look like you're in more control of what you're doing. It makes it easier for the examiner to look at, and therefore it makes it easier for the examiner to give you marks. So you have each of your exhibits here, and again, you can open up an exhibit on the screen that you're referring to. You can make it any size that you want. You can just leave it here. It can sit in the background. You can move it around, or you can just keep opening and closing it as you need it. You only ever need to have one exhibit open at any one time. I prefer to move it around. I would keep one open, and if I'm doing my calculations here, and then I would maybe move it around a little bit, I would keep it on screen. I would always keep the exhibit on screen that I'm working on. I can't do it today because they're not available on the system, but that's what I would do. I would have no more windows open than that. Don't have more than one exhibit open because it's just taking up space. The way I have it set up here with the spreadsheet on the left and the word processor on the right, that's my personal choice. You can have the word processor on top and you can have the spreadsheet below. You can do whatever, but what I would do is pick something that you like, pick a layout that you like. And the minute you go in and you attempt your first question, you just put that layout up there. You know where you're starting from. You know exactly what you're doing. Okay. So you've got your layout set up. And again, because you've been practicing so hard over the next 4 weeks, this all happens automatically. Before you even realize it, happens in seconds. So before you even realize it, your layout is there. It should happen so automatically. It should be like turning on your computer. It should be like logging into a system. It should be just so, it should be done so subconsciously. Nearly, you just have all of a sudden you're staring at your screen and your layout is already there. You shouldn't even have to think about it. It shouldn't take any time whatsoever. It should be just, this is just what I do. This is my process. And believe it or not, these exams are all about process. And if you find a process that works, it'll work for every exam. So if you're doing SBL next, if you're doing SBR next, whatever your next exam, if you have a next exam, this will work for them all. Just keep it simple. Keep the area around you clean. It's like having a clean desk around you. It's easier to find things if things are tidy. Okay, so then let's go in and doing some solutions. So I'm going to slightly cheat a little bit today by copying some content in. Now, what usually your requirements would be here. Now, instead of opening the windows, the first thing that I would do is I would copy the requirements into my exam paper or my exam solution. And they will copy in like this. And the same thing will happen. The layout won't copy across, but again, this is all done without even thinking about it. Sorry, let me just move this window. This is all done without even thinking about it. You're just putting these right down below. You know exactly what you're doing here. And the whole idea of this is that you will write your answers underneath them. So these are your A and your B and your C. So these are your sections of your exam, all matching your requirements. And then I think your professional marks are here. So again, in seconds, you have your question in front of you. Now, this is like a check. When you're writing your first solution, underneath here, you're going to go, okay, what do I have to do? Well, I have to talk about regulatory framework. I have to talk about mergers and acquisitions to protect the interests of shareholders and other stakeholders. And I get 5 marks for that. So you don't have to have multiple windows open. Straight away, you have something to guide you. And as you're writing underneath, you have to make sure, and I'm constantly going to say this, constantly going to concentrate on this, because this is a key part of exam technique. You just answer the question. Every word you're typing has to be to answer exactly what's being asked for here. If it's not, you're typing the wrong thing. You're wasting your time. And if you can manage your time and make sure you're always answering the right question, everything else will flow from that and it'll build great confidence. You got 5 marks for this. So you've got what? 9 minutes, 8 to 9 minutes for this. Plenty of time. Plenty of time. So what does a solution for this look like? So there's a couple of things that I would do. So I would build a plan first. And again, I'm just copying things in. I would build a plan. Oh, that didn't work. Still not working for me today. The one thing is when you're copying and pasting in this system, it's a little bit. So, okay. So what I've put this plan together. What are the 3 parts that I've been asked for? The reason for the framework, how to avoid negatively affecting shareholders, and how to avoid negatively affecting other stakeholders. So that's it. I have to write something under each of those 3 headings. You can leave the headings in there or you can move them away. But that's my plan. That's my answer plan. And then what I can do is I can go, okay, well, what's the reason for the framework? I'm going to write the reason for the framework under here. So what is the reason for the framework? Very simply, very simple. Keep it very simple. So The reason for the framework is to protect the interests of shareholders and to ensure a well-functioning market. 1 mark. Now, you will look at ACCA solutions and you might see 4 or 5 lines written for that. They are perfect solutions. This is an examining team that spends weeks and weeks and weeks putting the perfect answer together. Don't use that as a guide. Okay, get your point across. It's 1 mark. It's just a couple of lines. So what is the reason for the framework? Well, the reason for the framework is to protect the interests of shareholders and ensure a well-functioning market. Your first mark is done, you move on. Now I have to talk about how to avoid negatively affecting shareholders. Well, how do I do that? So how do I avoid negative? So what are the things that I have to keep in mind? So to ensure that shareholders are not negatively affected by mergers and acquisitions, I have 3 points. Protection of minority shareholders' rights, that management can't block when the deal is in the shareholders' interests, and there's sufficient time for the scrutiny of the proposal. That's it. Now, if you were thinking in your head that you have to write lots and lots of information on that, that's all you have to write. That's it. So now you've got 4 out of 5 marks, or you've got 3.5 out of 4. At the end of the day, if you get 3.5 out of every 4 marks in your ACCA exam, you'd be very happy. So don't be looking for perfection. Don't always look for 4 marks. Look for 3 out of 4, or look for 4 out of 5, or 9 out of 10, or 8 out of 10. Remember, the pass mark is 50. And if you're seeking to get maximum marks in every section, you are going to run out of time. But it's not about getting maximum marks for each section. It's about maximizing your marks in the time you have available. And if you get 7 or 8 out of 10 on average for every section you attempt, you're getting 70 to 80% mark. That is more than you'll ever need to pass an exam. So you have to start thinking like that, no matter how well you know something. Okay, so we have the reason for the functioning market, and see the way I left a line in there. So what you're telling the examiner is that, okay, I've answered your first question here. I'm going to leave a line. I've answered your second question, and then finally I'm going to go in and say, okay, well, I've answered 2 out of 3 of the points that the examiner has raised now, and now what's my 4th point? So other stakeholders. So for other stakeholders, the aim is to ensure there is not a decrease in the level of competition after mergers and acquisitions, and these can include customers, suppliers, and employees. Done. That's it. That's 5 marks. You may even make up time in that. It might even take you 7, 8, 9 minutes. So again, that's 5 marks, or that's 4 or 4.5 marks out of 5. Make life that little bit easier. Answer the question asked. Don't dress it up. Don't exaggerate your answer. Don't try and tell the examiner how much you know about this. They can only give you a maximum of 5 marks. So quickly get 4, 4.5 marks and move on. And make that time up for later on even. Let me just check and again, I'll be checking questions. Ashvin is asking about specific Excel functions that will benefit us. I will take you through those in a second when we move on to part C. Ashvin, and then do we have to delete the requirement questions in the end? Jenny, yes, always. I would say always, and I will come back to that at the very end. But yeah, delete the requirement at the very end, because again, you're looking for a professional layout. You want to make it look less exam level, but they're just really good to have. You can do it as you go, but I like to do it at the end of the very last review as a last minute check if I've got that time, in order to make sure I've answered all the questions. Okay, so simple requirement, really simple question, really simple answers. Very comfortably, you've got 4 out of 5 marks, if not 4.5, 5 out of 5. And you can move on, and it's been a nice start to an exam. Okay, and I am laboring these points, and when we do question 2 and 3, I will go a little bit quicker, and I won't, but I think it's really important that it's all about exam technique. It's not about what I know about mergers and acquisitions. It's not about showing off all of the knowledge. How you pass any exam that you'll ever do in your whole life is to make sure that the examiner by being able to answer being able to answer something simply, the examiner already knows you have to work hard to get to a simple answer. Because if it's a complicated answer, it means you didn't understand what you were doing. So the simpler it can be, the more marks you can get. And the more highly thought of the examiner has of you, the more they think that, wow, this is a really, really good student, because they must know so much to be able to create a really simple solution. So a simple solution, that's what that says to an examiner. This is a competent student. And now, human nature as it is, the examiner is thinking, oh, this is going to be a good exam paper. Because as somebody who has marked lots of papers in lots of different arenas, you know from looking at the first page or looking at the first screen on an exam paper. And when it's late at night or 2 o'clock in the morning and you're still marking papers, you open up a paper or you look at a paper and screen and you think, oh no, this student hasn't looked, hasn't studied, or hasn't made an effort, or hasn't read the question. You kind of think, oh, it's going to be a bad paper. But if you open up this and you see, wow, this student's thought about the answer, they've worked hard, they've practiced their questions, they know their stuff, they're able to do a question. That examiner is already thinking in their head, oh, this is a good student. And if you can get, so when it comes down to those calls where the examiner maybe does an odd 50-50 call here or there, that examiner thinking, oh, this is a good student, they know what they're talking about. And if there's anywhere they can give you the benefit of the doubt, they're more likely to look for that benefit of the doubt because this is what they know about you. So if you give them what they want, if you make their lives easier, imagine they have a marking scheme beside them. And as they're going through your paper, they're going, yes, point number one, point number one, point number two, tick, 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 tick. Now, on other exam papers, they could spend 4 times as long trying to understand, trying to go back up the screen, trying to figure out what the student is saying. But again, so make it easier. This is what the examiner knows about you. Okay, so it's really important. There's 2 questions actually the same there from Nur Edina and Maizra, sorry, again. They're wondering, can they put the answers in points, not in paragraphs? No. So I've used points in here because it's useful in the 3 parts here, but no, always paragraphs, because from somebody who has a big financial background as well as lecturing, you don't write reports to board of directors in bullet points. It just doesn't happen. You write them in paragraphs, well split out, points clearly made. They're for discussion, they're for interpretation. So use bullet points very sparingly. This might be possibly the only time I use bullet points in this whole solution for this small section here. So I would highly recommend you don't use bullet points. I would highly recommend that the type of layout that I do here for part A is the type of layout that you use for right throughout the exam, and you'll see the consistency of the layout that I will use here. And that's how you get more marks. That's how you get professional marks. And again, those 4 marks could make 4 marks turn a 48 to a 52, turn a very happy Monday morning or very sad Monday morning into a very happy Monday morning when the results come out. So again, give them what they want. This is not about you deciding which way you want to present better. This is about you knowing what the expectations are and meeting those expectations. It's not about opinions. In a funny way, it's not about your opinion, it's about their opinion, and their opinion is what matters. So if a member of a board of directors told you that they prefer to see something like this in a certain layout, you're not going to say, no, I'm doing it my way. You're going to say, of course, we'll do that for you. And this is no different. You might disagree, but it's not what's requested. Okay. Now, the second part. Discuss 2 theoretical propositions as raised by Lala's board of directors in relation to a company's capital structure. So 2 theoretical propositions, and it's in relation to the capital structure. It's worth 6 marks. So there you go. It's worth 6 marks, and it's obviously 3 marks each. And again, it's not, you don't even have to worry about a marking scheme here. Just assume these things. You're not going to be too far off it. So if we go to the exhibit for this one, that I can't quite, my computer is struggling a little bit. So what I'm going to do is going to use the two solutions here. So again, what's my plan? So first of all, I've done a plan. And my plan is just some quick words. So what's my answer? So this section was about the finance by debt and equity, and everything's come alive here. So it's on exhibit number 2, part 2, and where they talked about the board of directors saying a company should maximize its debt financing and too much debt can be harmful. So they're the two positions. So the first one is a company should maximize its debt financing, comment on that. The second one is too much debt can be harmful to a company as there needs to be a balance, comment on that. So when we're looking at the two solutions, so the first one, it's better for the company to be financed by debt, not equity. It's a very, very well-established rule. Miller and Modigliani, or Modigliani and Miller, and it's all related to tax shields. So it's a great benefit. Use debt, you get a tax shield. Debt is in long term cheaper than equity. So we know we're going to be talking about that. But what's the second point? Well, the second point is you can have too much debt. And too much debt can increase gearing, which can cause financial distress. So there's a trade-off and there's an optimal position. So now you've got your 2 points. Even writing what I've got there will get you 2 marks out of 6. So to get 6 marks out of 6 isn't that much more. So we turn that then into 4 to 5 line answers. That's all you need for this. 2 4 to 5 line answers. Now, where is so the first argument is that it's better for the company to be financed by debt, not equity, which we've already made. Modigliani and Miller model, because interest is paid before tax. Now, you see here, right? I have a little typo. Even I'm human. I have a little typo here. Don't worry about typos. Once the examiner knows what you're trying to say, you will get the marks. It's not an English language test. So don't worry too much about over reading things and over typing things, and even that your grammar isn't 100% correct. My grammar isn't 100% correct here, I'm sure, but it will not affect the amount of marks because once it's communicating the solution, that's all that matters. So don't get too worried if you feel that your English writing isn't as strong, or you don't think you're a good writer effectively. Once you're communicating your answer, that's all that really matters. So since interest is paid for tax but dividends are not, there's no tax on profits used to pay interest. And again, this is known as a tax shield, and it reduces the cost of capital when financing increases. So again, very simple. Now we have our second point here. And again, you're leaving a nice gap in between. You're making sure the examiner says, well, the examiner has raised 2 points. I am going to raise 2 points. I'm going to answer those 2 points. And the examiner will clearly see, here's the answer to your first point. That's worth 3 marks, Mr. Examiner. Here's the answer to my second point. That's worth 3 marks, Mr. Examiner. I've made your life so easy. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm your last paper, and you're going to go to bed with a smile on your face because I've made your life so much easier. The second, when highly geared, the benefit of tax shield does not hold true. As debt increases, the company experiences financial distress, which increases the cost of equity. High levels of gearing and cost of debt can also increase, and therefore there's a trade-off between the levels of debt and equity that targets the minimal cost of capital where corporate value is maximized. You have just earned yourself 6 marks. You have 10, and that's in my squashed area, you have 10 lines of text. The worst you will get out of that is 5 marks. That's the absolute worst you'll get out of that, but you'll probably get 5.5 or 6. Okay, so even if you get 5, even if you get the worst end, you've got 5 out of 6. I mean, 5 out of 6 marks goes a long way. 5 out of 6 is getting a big proportion. I mean, you're getting, what, 80-something% in your exam. So again, that's what you should be targeting. It's 6 minutes. So you have, 6 marks. So you have roughly 10 minutes. Always go on the lower side. Don't be spending too much time calculating that 1.8 marks or 1.8 minutes per mark. Go on the lower side and say, okay, 6 minutes or 6 marks, 10 minutes. Keep it simple. You are all well capable of thinking about this and writing 2 arguments that's 4 to 5 lines each in 10 minutes. Very, very well capable. It does come with practice. It does come with understanding the knowledge. It does come with learning how to apply the knowledge. And it does come with putting yourself under as much exam pressure as you can when you're practicing. And that includes time management. Okay, let's go through some of the questions here. Jin asked about typos in my answers. Funny, I covered that with my own typos there, Jin. So hopefully that answers that question. But in summary, don't worry about it. Would like to ask for a spreadsheet. There are some calculations involved in Power 2. How can we do that? I'm going to show you the Power 2. Is there any formula that can be used in the spreadsheet? For example, will the formula or present value table be available? No, it won't, Johnny, but I'm going to show you an easy way of doing all of that today. Mr. Allen, do we need to memorize Miller and Modigliani long name? Quite difficult to spell. No, if you're having a problem, I had it written in front of me, so I was okay. I would agree with you. I wouldn't know how to spell. I think I spelled it 3 times before I got it right. So don't worry about M&M model is fine. I don't think, if you can get that far, as I said, if using M&M instead of spelling out the names means you got 2.5 marks out of 3 instead of 3, so you're like, you have nothing to worry about. Don't worry about that at all. So yeah, make life simpler for yourself. That's what it is. Don't get stressed about the little things. If you can't spell it, just write M&M. If you try and spell it and it looks odd, the examiner will know. They will, and they will give, again, it's not a spelling contest, and it's probably one of the hardest things to spell in the whole exam. Yihan, sorry, there's a thing in the middle of it. Alan, may I ask if I have inserted the formula or workings in a sales spreadsheet to get the answer automatically? Do I still need to show? No. And again, I will show you that. I'm going to go all calculations now. For all of those people really keen to do calculations, we're going to go full on calculations now in 2 minutes. You will see everything that I do. And everything that I do is the same as a video I produced for ACCA about 2 or 3 years ago when they start doing the online exams, and it was all in consultation with the examining team. So you can trust me, it's okay. It's the way, it's probably their preferred way. They don't mind either way, but what you don't have to do is you don't have to do both. And everything that I do today, if you submitted this in an exam, you would do really, really well in the exam. So I'm not saying, oh, I'm doing it this way today, but you need to do it some other way. Everything I show you today, if you use that as a guide for your process for answering every question going forward, that is how you should do it. That is how you should answer your exam. And if you can produce what we do today in a future exam, you will pass very, very comfortably. Really will. So don't worry, I'm not leading you astray. There isn't a different way to do an exam. Everything you see today, you can take exactly that approach in your exam and you'll do very, very well. Okay, now, and again, keep on coming with the questions. I will check in after we kind of finish every single section and make sure that's okay. Let me just move the Zoom window. Okay, so part A and part B, and I know it's taken us a bit of time to go here with, but realistically in an exam, you've done a 5-mark question, you've done a 6-mark question, and you've done your little bit of planning. So you're probably about 20 to 22, 23 minutes of passing the exam now. But you are sitting there probably with a minimum of 9 out of 11 marks in your back pocket. You're feeling really good about yourself. You've had a really, really nice start. It's been simple, it's been straightforward. And you've realized that you didn't have, like, look at the things that I didn't do. And it's about, sometimes exams are about the things you don't do rather than things you do. So we talked about Modigliani, it's even hard to say, and Miller model. Let's call it M&M model. I didn't say what it was. I didn't write a paragraph exactly what it was. I didn't define it. I gave an indication of what it's about, but I didn't define it. I didn't say, oh, it was created in this year and here's everything I know and here's the 5 advantages and here's the 5 disadvantages. Because this is a professional report. This is, you are reporting you're reporting to the board of directors. They're not interested in the historical reasons. They don't want to lecture on the M&M model. They don't want to lecture on what gearing is. They already know what gearing is. If they don't know what gearing is, they shouldn't be on the board. So don't tell the obvious things. Don't spend your time talking about the obvious things, because that's not what you're asked for. You're asked to give your opinion on an established view. And you have to assume that that view, they already know what M&M is, and they already know what gearing is. So don't ever try and over-explain things. You're reporting to the board of directors. You can assume a certain amount of knowledge. You can assume they know what you're talking about. So you're not trying to teach this subject to anybody. Remember, don't try and teach any of this subject to anybody. You're not trying to do that. You are talking to the board of directors of a company, of quite a large company, of quite a successful company. So have them in your mind. Imagine you're sitting there typing your answer and they're behind you. And they're standing there in their suits and they're sitting there drinking their coffee, and you are presenting this in a board meeting. You're not going to say, hold on a minute, I'm going to tell you what a tax shield is and bring out 17 slides on how tax shields benefit. You have to accept that they know that already, or they will question you if they want. And if the examiner wanted you to tell them, they would say, as part of your answer, please explain in detail what a tax shield is or what an M&M model is. So don't look for something that's not there, and don't answer something that's not there. So it is about, you have to resist that temptation. And kind of go, oh, examiner, I know all of this. I know what a tax shield is. I can explain the M&M model in great detail. They're not interested. And you will lose professional marks because of that. You will lose so much time because of that. So think about like these questions, and later on in the day or tomorrow or the next time you're studying, honestly ask yourself, would you have answered those questions like I answered them today? Because believe me, my aim here today, and everybody's aim, is to make sure you all pass your exam. So I'm not giving you any guidance that will make passing your exam harder. I'm making it easier. So you have to sit back and you have to think, well, honestly, would I have answered part B in that way? Or would I have gone down the road of explaining the MMM model? Would I have given an example of what a tax shield is? Would I have talked about gearing and how good it is and how bad it is? So really make sure that you get to the point. And having talked to examiners in ACCA, you hear about these people who get #1 in the world and #1 in Malaysia, or the top 10 in the world. Some of those papers have a lot less content than papers from students who get 30 and 40%. The amount of writing that they do is a lot less than the people who get 30 and 40%, because it's not a writing contest. It's a interpretation, and it's showing off your knowledge. So just keep that in mind. And so you're not taking a risk doing that. You're doing, this is exactly what they're asking for. So don't think about it being an examiner, think about it being the board of directors. So you have to make assumptions. You are at the highest level of ACCA. You're going to be an accountant soon. So a board of directors assumes you know the knowledge. You're the accountant. You're supposed to know it. You're just giving them advice. You're showing them a little bit that, oh, I have this M&M model. This is a well-established model, and they agree with me. If somebody might say, oh, can you go into that in more detail? But if they don't ask you, don't do it. So just keep those things in mind. Don't over-answer, okay? Now, as I said, I'm spending a lot of time on question 1. I won't be spending as much time on question 2 and 3. So I'm getting all of my points across. And again, don't worry about writing too many notes down. This is being recorded. So I would recommend that you interact with this as much as possible, but don't worry about missing anything or saying, oh, writing down things, because if you're writing things down too much, then you're not listening to the next point and you get a bit lost. So just interact with this as much as you can, especially for part C, because this is where most of the marks are, but it's where the complexity is. So just go with it as much as you can. You can always watch the video back later on and slow it down and stop at different parts and work through it in more detail if you want. But don't get too worried, and don't get too worried about the exactitude of the calculations. What you're looking for to get out of part C, I would say, is using the spreadsheet effectively for doing the calculations and looking at how it's laid out, and how I use the spreadsheet and how I use the word processor, and how they interact to give an answer that you will get really, really high marks for. And that's what you should be looking out for the next part. And again, anything you wanted to follow up on, you can obviously ask questions, but the video will be available and you can slow it down or take it in stages at another time to go through the question in a lot of detail if you want. So let's go through that question. Now, this is effectively the report. So what does a report have? A report has an introduction, always has an introduction. And we'll even bold it and we'll make it nice for the examiner. Now, they have a couple of sections in the report. And what are the sections in the report? Well, you're given that. That's right throughout you're provided that in the information that you get. Okay. So what's in the report? Well, you have factors to consider. You can do this now or you can do this later on. That's completely up to you. But I find it's a little bit easier to do it at the beginning because then you can find it, you can just put things underneath it. Then what else do you have? You have your next section. And I have obviously slightly cheated on this. So let me show you. So you have your factors to consider, and then you have your capital structure changes. And then finally, you have your conclusion. Now, that's your report. Now your report is done. Your layout is done. Now you have a structure. And what you're looking to do in the spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is used to create the background to support your calculation. So let's start off, and you can do this in any order, but I would generally write the introduction first. And the reason why I write the introduction first is as much for me as for the examiner. And it's as much for me to keep me on track, to make sure that I know what I'm trying to do. And if I'm in doubt, if I think I'm overwriting, or if I think I'm losing, like going in the wrong direction, use your introduction as your kind of foundation. Use it as your stake in the ground and saying, okay, I've written an introduction. That means this is what I'm trying to achieve with the report. So if I'm not achieving this, I shouldn't be writing it. So what's my introduction? This report discusses the financial and other factors that the shareholders of both Lala company and Kawa company should consider before agreeing to the acquisition. It also considers the impact of the acquisition on Lala's company's capital structure under two payment methods. Done. So now everything that you write from here on in, under your two headings and under your conclusion, should be related to these 4 lines. If you are writing anything that doesn't relate to those 4 lines, you're going the wrong direction. You're just using up time and you're not going to get marks for that time. Because any time that you have that doesn't get marks for is a waste of time, but it's still using it. So you've got your introduction written. It's clear what you're trying to do. You've got your nice headings in between. You've got your factors to consider. Now, what I would generally do now is I would do all my calculations. I would just go through all the calculation process from the very beginning, and then I would come back and I'd finish my report. Because if you think you have all the calculations on the left-hand side here, and then you can go in and you can just put in all, because obviously you can write some theoretical answers under here, but you're going to need your numbers to talk about. So it's easier to do the rest. But you have this introduction always on your screen. You can always go back to it and say, what am I trying to do here? Okay. Now, the calculations for this question are usually quite long, but you do get provided a lot of information in the question. And again, you will likely have one of your exhibits open here. So you'll have your spreadsheet, you'll have your word processor, and you'll have one floating exhibit being used for each time you do a calculation. Now, obviously, as mentioned, I don't have that because this hasn't been built by ACCA. So I'm just going to be using the PDF which you will use. But again, you don't need any more open than that. And then what we will do is we will look at this about how best to do calculations. So how best to use the spreadsheet. And sometimes it's really easy. So again, I have slightly cheated here. And again, it's just in the interest of time more than anything, because if you had to stand there and watch me type all of these sections in, it would be we'd need longer than 4 hours. So what I have done is I've just quickly built a base. I haven't done any of the numbers. All I have done is I don't even know whether it'll allow me copy this in or not. Try that again. If it doesn't, we might have to do it the long way. They are very temperamental systems. I don't think it's going to allow me. And it's funny because sometimes it will allow you do it and sometimes it won't allow you do it. And there generally is no reason. There is no reason why sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And on the basis that it works and the basis that it doesn't work. There we go. Okay. It did work this time. So I have just put the layout, and again, it's just for a little bit of speed today because of it just takes too long for me to do all of this typing, but I'm doing all of the calculations from scratch. Okay. So what I've done here is I said, okay, well, what questions are we asking here? Well, the first one is estimate the value of each Kawa share if it is demerged and listed as an independent company. So, which is C1. So we're going to look at the Kawa cost of capital first, because we have to get the cost of capital as the first point. And these appendices here are written in that way. And we've got some more, and we'll go through all of that down below. It's always good to keep a little bit of layout. It's nice to use bold. It's nice to use underlining. I wouldn't go any further than that. I wouldn't use multicolored. I wouldn't use shading. I wouldn't use anything like that. Use gaps, use a nice layout, but don't get too complicated. Okay, so first of all, we're going to look at the Kawa. Now, and you don't have to write Kawa company all of the time. I just write Kawa, make your life a little bit easier, or you'll be writing CO 40 or 50 times. And again, that just eats into the time. The examiner knows who you're talking about. So what first of all, we're going to look at here is the market value of the equity. Now, what is the market value of the equity? So we are told that they get, and again, a lot of this information is on exhibit number 3. And actually, most of the information for most of this part is on exhibit number 3 and then exhibit number 4. So to calculate the market value of the equity, you were told that a lot of the information is in the question. You were told that the part of the business that will become Kawa is 24.5% of the total value. So it's plus 24.5. And we're going to multiply that by, so what's the cost of the equity? Well, the trading price, the shares are trading at 245 each. And they have 2 million shares. Or 2 billion, it's 2,000 million shares. Oh. So unlike Excel, and I still make that mistake, you just have to start every calculation with an equals. And we will do some, they don't have the, yeah, so this one here, we'll just do some layouts in there. I never worried too much about that. 24.5. Oh, this is percent, sorry. Okay. Now, the difference in this question, or difference in this solution with the ACCA answers, is if you take the ACCA answer now, the examiner will say it's approximately equal to 1,200. Now, there's a number of ways of doing this. You can try and replicate the answer. I would keep on just using the Excel spreadsheet. So the examiners still write them down like they're paper-based answers. So if you looked at this number and you widen it out, it'd be on your calculator, it'd be 120 something 0.9 and whatever it might be. And you might say 1,200. I would just keep on using the calculation that I have in the Excel. It's just much easier than that. So they have 1.2 billion approximately. We have an exact number here. So it's the 1201. And the next one then is the Kawa. And we're going to look at the market value of the debt. And what is the market value of the debt? Well, it's very straightforward. It's 400 million. Now, this is all in dollars. You have a choice to do. You have lots of things that you can do. We're here with the, I'm not too sure on this one. Do they give they give kind of a hard way of doing the currencies. You can do it here. And you can turn everything into dollars if you wish. It doesn't really make a huge difference either way. And we can put up here that it's dollar millions. Okay. Just to be 100% sure and that there's no confusion. but that's up to you. If you left it without the dollars and just, you can put in the dollar millions and leave it the same for everybody else. And that's what we'll do, because we're just going to make life a little bit simpler for ourselves. So the next one then that we're going to do, and again, don't be afraid to leave a line every now and then. You've looked at the market value of debt, you've looked at the market value of equity, you're going to look at a slightly different calculation now. So just leave a line, it just looks neater, it's just easier to follow. It just means it's not line after line of text and or calculations. So the next one we're going to look at is the estimate of the equity beta. And again, you're expecting this because you've seen some of the information that you have been provided before. So in the question, you're told that it's 1.15, so equals 1.15, which is the industry estimate. And then you're multiplying that by the $1.2 million of shares. So again, you have that here. See the way I'm linking them? You can type in the number over and over again. And this number comes up quite a lot. You can type it in over and over again, or you can use that number. And then we're adding, so if we're calculating the equity beta, we have to add the debt and the equity. So we have the equity, and what's the debt number? Well, the debt number is the 400 million, but what do we have to take into account for the 400 million? We have to multiply that by 0.8 or 80% because of the tax shield. And again, just get your brackets correct in your calculation. And then this whole calculation then is divided by 1.1, or sorry, is divided by your 1.2 billion. And again, you're going to need to tidy up your numbers every now and then. And that gives you 1.46. Okay, so what have you done? You've taken the industry standard, you've taken your cost of equity, which is, and again, if you just double click on the formula, you've taken your cost of equity, you've taken your cost of debt less the tax shield divided by your equity. So you calculate your equity beta at 1.46. Now you calculate your cost of equity. How do you calculate your cost of equity? Well, again, you're given a lot of the information. So you have 3%, and the 3% is the risk-free rate. The risk-free rate of return, again, it's given to you in Appendix 3. Then, what are you adding to your 3%? Well, the next rate that you're given is the market risk premium of 7.2%, again, given to you in the question. What do we take into account for the 7.2%? Well, we have to multiply that by the cost of equity, which you've calculated up here as 1.46. Again, that's 30, or you can turn that into a percentage, and it's 13.49% or 13.5%, whatever way you want to do it. So now your cost of equity is 13.49%. Now we're going to look at the post-tax debt cost. Again, this is the easy part. So these type of things you should be well used to practicing at this stage. Now, what is the post-tax debt cost? Well, what do we know? Well, we know the cost is 4.1% for loan notes B. Okay, so we know that. What else do we know? Well, we also know that we're adding 0.3%. Because you are told that the pre-tax cost of debt for both will increase by 0.3% after the unbundling. So it's going to be 4.4% multiplied by what? 0.8 or 80%, because the tax rate is 20% and you get the tax shield on debt. And you can just turn that into a percentage of 3.52. And again, for an examiner, this is looking really neat. They're just ticking off as they go. They're really, really happy right now. And finally, cost of capital. So remember, cost of capital is made up of cost of equity and cost of debt. So what is your cost of capital? Well, First of all, we have the cost of equity. Oh, use your equal sign. First of all, we have the cost of equity multiplied by the equity plus the cost of debt, and it's the post-tax cost of debt multiplied by the debt amount of 400 million. Okay, now, again, use your brackets wisely in this. This whole calculation then gets divided by your equity plus your debt. Now again, remember, you can go back to the video later on, you can pause on this, you can follow the steps as well, or you can take a calculator and try and do it. But again, highly recommend that you do it this way. So your total cost of equity hopefully is around 11%. Perfect. So that's your cost, or sorry, your total cost of capital is 11%. Yeah, so that's what you're asked to do, is your cost of capital. You can bold that just to be 100% sure that the examiner doesn't miss it. That's your final answer as such for this section. So now you have your total cost of capital. Again, it is about following the steps. Look how neat that looks. You don't have long formulas written out. You don't have, and what else do you not have? Well, you don't have that situation that, so what if you put 1400 in there? What if you calculated on your calculator and you just typed in 1400? The examiner has no basis by which, how did you come up with a number? What was your logic? And they can't give you any marks as they don't have the logic. But if you type something in wrong here, at least they would know what your logic was. See the way they can see all the formulas, they can see everything written at the top of the screen. Okay, and again, I mentioned earlier, let's imagine this 2.45 should have been 3.45. I change out 2 to a 3 and everything updates, and then everything that is linked into below updates as well. So it's really important that you use this spreadsheet. And I know it's a bit time consuming now, but a bit of practice goes really, really fast in this. Mr. Allen, can we just type KE, KD, VE? Oh yeah, if you want to. This is just my habit for showing you, everybody, Jen. So yeah, like you would imagine the examiner knows what KE means and KD means. Whatever. This is all about getting into your routine and how you're communicating with the examiner. And once you communicate effectively with the examiner, they will be very, very happy. So whatever you want to use, as habit, I just use these because maybe all students aren't always familiar with the shorter names, but by all means, absolutely. Let's say wrongly calculate the cost of equity. Calculating WACC will have credit mark using I think, Saeed, what you're asking there, and come back to me if I'm wrong, but if you calculate one, it has a knock-on effect on others and it's wrong. Yes, it is, but ACCA have what's called the own figure rule. So if you calculate, let's say, the cost of capital wrong, but you apply it correctly in other sections, you won't be penalized for losing marks as you go. I think that's what you're asking. If not, come back to me and I will come back to that again. Okay, so this for some reason isn't, this says undertaken in there anyway, it's just a heading, so don't worry about it too much. So we have now calculated the cost of capital, and we know that's 11%. Now we're going to calculate the cost of equity capital if the demerger is undertaken. Now, so what's the sales revenue, first of all, for CAWA? Okay. So what is the sales revenue? Now, again, you can look at your ACCA answer and they've long, a bit like what Jen said, they have like 5 or 7 or 10 words and you could be typing all day. Even what I'm typing, as Jen said, you could shorten that as well. Don't get too overcomplicated. Don't try and replicate what's in an ACCA answer. As I said, they have spent a long time doing that. So the sales revenue attributable to CAWA. Well, what do you know? Well, you're told in the question is 20%. You're very clearly told that 20% of the sales revenue is related to CAWA. What is the sales revenue? Well, it's 4.5 billion, and that is equal to 900 million. So there you go, that's your sales revenue. And this is just some information we're just putting together. So what's the sales growth rate? And again, you don't have to necessarily do this part, but I think it's nice to have it all together. It's all in the question, but you're just putting all the information and it makes it much easier then to do your calculation later. Your profit before interest and tax is 21%. Your tax is 20%. your additional investment is equal to 0.25 for every dollar, which is going to be 0.25% or 0.25, and then your cost of capital. We've already done that, and again, you just link that in. Oh, it's equals. I still can't do the equals thing. It's equals, and again, you can just tidy it up. And then finally, your free cash flow growth. And you're told that's 2.5%. Okay, so they are the key numbers that you're going to need for your calculation. So we go down here, and again, if you have too many lines, I just did this just to make sure. I know you can't cut them or delete them, but don't worry if you have too many lines in between here. You don't get penalized or anything for that. You're just leaving plenty of space. So first of all, you are told what's the sales revenue increase. So the sales revenue growth rate is 6%. So you know that this year's sales are 900, and for year one, they're going to be multiplied by 1 plus 6%, because it's 106%, which is 954. Okay. Now, remember what you can do here. So what's the other years to shorten to make it easier for you each year. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, equals. We're going to say the 954, each year is 1 plus 6%. Okay. Now remember, if you put your dollar signs in front of your B16 there, then you drag that across, you have just calculated all of the sales needed. Again, you can do 1 decimal place, 2 decimal places, no decimal place. It's really up to you. I think we'll just do no decimal places. Again, all your sales are calculated just by using one formula and dragging it across. And you're sure that's correct. You've just done the formula once, you don't have to think about that again. What's your profit before interest and tax? Well, you know it's a percentage. So it's the sales revenue multiplied by the 21%, which is the 200. And again, we'll just tidy it up a bit. Keep it consistent, and you drag your formula across. Oh, we forgot our dollar signs. We drag that formula across again. And again, all that means is, what if you got that 21 wrong? What if you read the question wrong and you realize later it should be 24? You change that to 24% and it all updates for you. So it's a real advantage to use the spreadsheet effectively like this. What's your tax rate? Well, we know what our tax rate is. So we're multiplying our profit before interest and tax, and we're multiplying that by our tax rate of 20. And we put our little dollar signs in to make sure it always picks that up. We can tidy up that number, and we can drag that across. Then what's the additional investment? So our additional investment is the increase in sales, remember? So what's the increase in sales, first of all? Well, our increase in sales is the 954 minus the 900 multiplied by this additional investment of 25. Right? And for the other ones, then it's a little bit there. So it's that year minus that year multiplied by the 0.25. Again, we can use our dollar signs. We can drag that across. So what is that? It's the difference between, it's the sales from this year minus the sales from last year multiplied by 0.25. Now, okay, what are our free cash flows? So we see now that our free cash flows are, well, what are we doing here? We know our profit before tax. What comes off our profit before tax? Our tax. What else are we using cash for? Well, it's the additional investment. So it's the 14. So that's 146 million. Again, tie that up. that across. Okay. Now you were asking about formulas earlier on. Some of them can be a bit funny in ACCA, so we'll try this one. So how do you get the present value of this? It's 1. It's 1 divided by 1.11. Okay, so it's 1 plus the cost of capital, which is 11%. Again, feeding that in. So that's 132. Now, what you can do is if you use your brackets for the 11% here, okay, you can, no, sorry, not brackets. If you use your dollar signs, and you can drag that across. Now, obviously, that's all to the power of 1. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this. One way is the sign, this sign here is to the power of in a spreadsheet. And so that's to the power of 2, which hasn't worked and doesn't always work effectively. The other thing you can do is just, you can really simply up here use the 11%, and you can just put 1. You can just, well, you have your discount tables, which are not available here, but you have your discount tables, you can do that. You can also do multiplied by multiplied, but this should work. But again, it's the formatting of what they allow. So they're not allowing that format, unfortunately. So we're going to have to do it for now. We're going to have to do this old-fashioned way. So we know that the 1 divided by 1.11 is 0.0909 for year 1. It's 0.8116. And again, you can just take your tables and you can just write those if you want. I just don't have tables quite handy with me. So again, you can just do it this way. And again, remember, this is not, the ACCA tool is not Excel. And again, these are the same, so you can drag that across. The ACCA tool is not an Excel file. It doesn't have all the same tools as Excel. So just so the examiner doesn't think I've just put random numbers in there, I'll just put discount factor. You can just put 11%. But again, you can just type in the ones if you want, or you can just go into this formula and type it in here if you wish to do it that way. It's really up to you. Okay. Now we're just going to finish this part of it, then I will give you a break. I'll check any more questions and then I'll give you a break before we move on. But let's calculate this corporate value. So the corporate value for years 1 to 4 is, now we can use the equals and we can say plus, 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 or another thing you can do is the sum formula. Again, we'll do this, which is 494 million. Now, year 5 onwards, this is definitely where the ACCA system will struggle. So you may have to do some of this on your calculator. So what we know is that. So let's start off with what we know. Well, we know the value for 5 years onwards. So when we're looking at the corporate value for year 5 onwards, we have to start off with the free cash flow number from the closest year, which is year 4. So we start off with 175 million. Okay. Now we multiply that by the cost of the growth. So you're told that it's 2.5%. So it's 1.02. So it's 1.025, which is 1 plus the 2.5% growth. Okay. Now we are dividing that by the cost of capital minus the growth rate. And the growth rate here is 2.5%. And I could have added that to the one above if I wanted to do it that way. Okay, now we can just get a number in here. Okay, so we get 2109 for that. Okay, but what do we have to do? We have to multiply that by 1.11 to the power. This is where, if you could all talk, I'd be hoping you'd shout the answer to me, to the power of -4. Okay. So it's one. So what you're actually doing, if you were to type it in a formula, what you're actually doing is 1.11 to the power of -4. And it might work by itself here. Okay, so it has worked. So that's the answer. It just doesn't do well when it's in the so we can move this up here. Okay. It just doesn't work very well when it's working with you can call this anything, the -4 discount factor. It doesn't matter what you call it. You don't even have to call it anything if you don't want to. So what we're saying is that it is, what are we doing here? We're taking the 4 years, we're taking into account of the growth rate, we're dividing it by the difference between the cost of capital less the growth rate. And we have to multiply that all by 1.11 to the power of -4, because you're taking out the previous 4 years, because you're looking from 5 years onwards, and you've created a discount factor for those 5 years, and you get 1389. And again, remember that discount factor, 1.11 to the power of -4. Okay, so your total corporate value is your year 1 to 4 plus your year 5 onwards. And again, you can tidy up those numbers. So you have 1883 million or 1.83 billion. We have dollar millions up here, so that's covered that. We don't have to worry about putting millions or dollar signs in front of anything. It's pretty straightforward and obvious to the examiner. Okay, so that's a lot to cover, I'm sure, at this stage. So I think what we'll do now is have a break for a bit. I'm going to check, I'll go through questions first, and then we're just going to have a quick 15-minute break just to let your brains reset. We'll finish the rest of this calculation. We will finish this question, and then I'm going to go through questions 2 and 3 a lot quicker, just to show you the process again, just in a faster format. Okay, so Z, if the question is using currency other than dollar symbols, do we need the key in the symbol like pound, euro, dollar, Japanese yen? You can, but honestly, Z, I wouldn't bother. I would just do something like I do at the top. I'm going to go, oh, dollar million or euro millions. Or you could even write in the box, let's say beside one of these answers, let's say here, these were all euro millions. You could just write in all euro millions or something like that if you wanted to be 100% sure, but don't worry too much. The examiner will understand what you're doing. Ashvin, if the power function doesn't work, we'll have to use the calculator when doing the Black-Scholes option model, or say dividend growth questions, or is there an alternative method? Now, you cannot use the calculator. You can use your own calculator. I would recommend using your own calculator and not the system's calculator, because I don't know whether you can see now, I've had the same calculator for a very, very, very long time now, and I know exactly where every button is and nearly what every button does at this stage. And so using your own calculator, yes. The power one works, but it kind of works in a funny way. It doesn't work as part of the formula, but you've seen the way I've worked around it for the discount factor of the -4. So you can do it in parts like that and then just put them into one calculation. There's no right way or wrong way of doing it, Ashvin, but what it is, it's picking away now. It's picking an approach now and using it for every question going forward. So you're not even thinking about in the day of the exam, oh, how will I do this? You actually just, I know how, this is how I do this. And again, you've nearly done it before you realize you've done it, because that's what saves you time. Arena, will there be a playback of this? Yes. Is the recording? Yes. Okay, so that's already been answered. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to be pretty exact. Like in an AFM exam, it has just gone 9:33 for me. So I think that's 4:33 for you, if I'm not wrong. Be back at 4:50 your time, or just in 15 to 16 minutes. And I'm just going to start again very exactly at that time. So please come back at that time, but go for a walk or refresh your head or stop thinking about AFM for a few minutes, and we will come back and finish this question. So I will talk to you soon. Okay, hi everybody, and welcome back. Just one thought I had while we were on the break, and it's kind of related to some of the questions that were asked. I'll answer now as well. Is that when you're in an exam sitting or an exam situation, and you saw what happened to me, I was putting in the formula and the power of didn't work, and it doesn't work as part of the formula, whether it's me or whether it's the restricted version of Excel, if you want to call it, that the spreadsheet is. Don't panic. Okay, there's always another solution. Take a breath and move on. Nothing, no one point of an exam is the end of the exam. So don't panic at all. Just find a slightly different way around it. Use your calculator, do the spreadsheet like I did, but just take your time and don't panic. And again, practice will put you in those situations. Just a couple of questions while we were on the break, or a few questions that I will answer quickly. Saeed is wondering, using the calculations like the cash flows or the IRR, if we use Excel instead of traditional method, do we deserve the full mark? Yes, you do, Saeed, but I don't think they work in this. And I think that's why it's really important, Saeed, and everybody else, that you practice. This tool is available to all ACCA students, okay? And you might have to use the exhibits in PDF format in some questions. Some of them are there, but it's available to you all. Use it all going forward. Find out what the limits are. Even sometimes today when I was doing it, I was thinking of Excel and not a spreadsheet. And then I go, oh, the spreadsheet can't do that. You have to find different ways. So practice on this, find out the limits. Basically, the rule is anything this spreadsheet can do, you can do. And that's the rule. So anything it's turned on for or that's allowable, you can use it and you will get full marks for it. Huge saying, is there a way to insert rows or columns in a spreadsheet like in Excel? No, there isn't. And if not, so what you can do, not to overly complicate it, but I'm going to go down the bottom just so I don't. So let's imagine this section here, combined company cash payment, and I needed another 4 lines. What I can do is I can copy everything underneath it, and I can, again, I always get, these are, I can cut it, no, that's the paste button. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can drag them down is probably the best thing to do. So you highlight the sections and you can drag them down. So if you needed more lines at the very beginning, highlight everything that's underneath it and just drag it down those few lines, and that's the best thing to do. But no, you can't insert lines and you can't insert columns and you can't delete lines and columns. So, but again, like I said earlier up here about having a few extra lines, don't worry about having the extra lines either. It's fine. The examiner will check it all. They will know that there's content there. Okay, so I'm going to continue on this. We're going to pick up the pace a little bit on the calculation because I think all of the spreadsheet tips have been given. You've seen the layout, you've seen how I do things, and I want to get on to the solution for part 2 as well, or sorry, the solution for part C as well. So we're getting a good bit of time spent on that. So if we look at the, where are we now? We've calculated the total corporate value. So now we're calculating the value attributable to the equity. Well, what's the value attributable to the equity? Well, it's 25%, isn't it? Because the equity is 1.2 billion. The debt is 400 million. So the value attributable to the equity is equity over total capital. So it's 1.2 million. So if you wanted to do, it's 1,200 divided by 1,600, which is 75%. Okay, multiplied by our answer up here. And that number is 1413. Again, you'll notice that ACCA do 1 decimal place in these numbers. You can make everything 1 decimal place if you want. I don't think it really makes any difference. And what's the per share value? Well, again, this is where I think the spreadsheet comes into its own, because the per share value, we know we have 2 billion shares. We know we have the value attributable to of up here. And then the per share value is sorry, my apologies. That's the wrong way around, isn't it? So 1413 divided by, and we've got the number, did I? Oh, it's the one number we didn't type in anywhere. So it's the 2 billion and it's 71. So it's 71 cents. And again, if you wanted to, if you're really kind of quick and comfortable doing this, you could put the dollar in front of it if you wanted to. And then you could do the decimal places with the dollar in front of it, or do whatever way you want, but it doesn't really The two decimal places are the 71 is the more important thing here. Now we're going to move on to the Kawa original value per share. So what is the Kawa original value per share? Well, the value of equity was 1.2 billion, which we know. The number of shares is 2 billion. Oh, sorry, using that equals again. You see, even I get out of practice. And that's 60 cents per share. So the gain, what is the gain if Kawa is demerged? Well, all of the numbers you already have. So it's 71 minus the 60. And we are going to divide that by the 60 because that's, we're going to divide that by the 60. And if you turn that into a percentage, you get 17.72%. I think it's 18.3% or something in the exam paper, but that's just because of the decimal places and Excel is more exact. Don't worry too much about that. That's what you're using. It'll be the right answer. Okay, so now you've got your gain if it's done. Now we're going to move on to Appendix 3, which is the sale of Kawa to Lala. And this is covering C part 3. And again, we have moved, this is all in Exhibit 4. All of the information we need in here is in Exhibit 4. So the Lala PE ratio. So we are told that the PE ratio of the industry is 15.61, and we are told that Lala is likely to be 10% lower. So 15.61 by 19% is 14.049. Again, something like that, I wouldn't worry. You can do all this at the end, but again, it's up to you what you want to do. Then the equity value is the 14.05 multiplied by, and hopefully again you're all screaming at me here. So what we multiply the 14.05 is the 171 million, giving us 2.4 billion. And again, you can do whatever which way you want to do that. So now we have an equity value. Okay, and that's all driven by all of the information that we've done, calculated all the way through here. Now, the next part that we move on to is the Kawa equity value. And again, these are very, very detailed questions. So the Kawa equity value we know is 1.2 billion, and the Kawa PE estimate is the 1.2 million divided by the 1.2 million divided by the 117.1 million. Sorry, I'm doing that. Yeah. Again, that's 10.25. So you got the equity value, and you got the PE ratio of Lala of 14.05, and you got the PE ratio of Kawa of 10.25. Now, the profits after tax of the combined company, and again, you can go through all of this a little bit later, okay, and look at the numbers. But the profits after tax of the combined company, which you are provided in Exhibit 5, and obviously that's where we got the, sorry if it wasn't clear, the 171 million was from Exhibit 5, and the 117.1 million was it from Exhibit 5 as well for the calculations there. So we'll just widen that a bit. And the profit after tax of the combined company. So what do we know? Well, we know the profit after tax is going to be the 171. It's also going to be the 117.1. We are also told that there is an extra amount of 62 million due to combining the two companies. So the profit after tax is 350 million. The average PE ratio of the two companies, you're told it's a midpoint. So the midpoint of the PE ratio of, again, equals. The midpoint of the Lala PE ratio plus the midpoint of the Kawa PE estimate divided by, so those two together added by 2. And again, so it's 12.15. The estimate of the equity value of combining the two companies is the potential profit of the combined companies multiplied by the average PE ratio which is 4.2 billion. And then the additional value created by combining the two companies. So we know that the additional value comes from, first of all, what is the value of the company when they're combined? And then what is the value of the company when they are on their own? So you're taking away the equity value of Lala, sorry, and you're taking away the equity value of Kawa. And you are tidying up this. So 651 million. So what we're actually saying is that there's an additional equity of 651 million created by selling Kawa to Lala over and above what they would be if they're on their own. Now, we move on and we kind of park that for the time being, and we look at the cash offer. And all of this comes together when we're doing our solution at the very end. So let's have a look at our cash offer. And we know that the shareholders will receive 66 cents per share from the sale of Kawa. So they will receive 0.6 per share, and you can put the dollar sign in and stuff like that if you wanted to, but I wouldn't be too worried. So equal to 0.66 multiplied by the 2 billion shares. So they will receive 1.3 billion in total. The Kawa share value we know is 0.6 or 60 cents. So what is the gain on the Kawa share value? Well, we know that it's plus 0.06 divided by 0.6. Divided by this number here, and it's 10%. Okay, so then Lala shareholders is what's the estimated value of Lala shareholders? So the estimated value of Lala shareholders is the 4.25 million, which this is what we calculated up here already, minus the share value offer here, which is going to be equal to 2933 or 2933.7. And that is divided by 1.2 million shares. And that gives you $2 per share, or $2.44 per share, sorry. So that is the estimated value. So what is the original value of Lala? And the original value of Lala is the 2.402 million. And we have those numbers calculated up here. And again, you can keep on using them as much as you want. We have already calculated some of those, and some of them are given in the question. So there's a 2.402. So again, we can keep using these numbers if we want to. And again, this comes from practicing, knowing where the numbers are. So the 2.402 million divided by the 1.2 billion shares, giving you a neat $2 per share. And then what is the gain? The gain is 44 cents. It's 2.44 minus the $2. So the gain is plus or equals 0.44, or you could do, again, to effectively use the spreadsheet, it's a 2.44 minus the 2, and that is divided by the $2. We can turn that into a nice neat percentage of 22% or 22.09%. So there's a gain for Kawa of 10%, and there's a gain for Lala of 22.09%. You can see at this stage, and sometimes even for me, it takes a lot of concentration. This takes a lot of effort to go through. We're now on nearly 70 lines of Excel. We're probably just over halfway through the calculations that we have to do. So it's really important that you kind of keep that concentration. And again, a marathon runner doesn't just run a marathon tomorrow. They spend a lot of time practicing, and that's what you're going to need to do. So first of all, for the share for share offer, there's additional shares issued. Now, what additional shares issued for Lala do you have to be? Well, it's a 1-for-3 offer, isn't it? So Kawa has 2 billion of shares divided by 3. I'm gonna have to remember that. Divided by 3. We just get a round number. So 667 million shares. Okay. The equity value. The equity value of the combined company we already know because we have calculated that number above. And it's just 4253. And then finally, the per share value. So the new per share value of the combined company is the 4253 divided by, now it's 1.2 billion shares plus the new number of 667. So what is the per share value after issuing the new shares? Because they've already issued 1.2 billion shares. Now they're potentially issuing another 667 million to Kawa if it's a share for share offer. So what's the per share value now? It is 2.28. Okay. So now what is the gain to Kawa shareholders? Okay. So the gain to Kawa shareholders is we know we have the 2.28. So you think I get used to that, but you start off with the 2.28, you minus out. We know that the 60 cents up here of the share value. Okay. We need to multiply that by 3 because of the issues of 3 shares for 1. And the gain is 48 cents. What is that gain overall as a percentage? So the percentage gain is the 48 divided by the 1.8. And then in percentage terms, that's the 26.58. It's 26.8 or something in the solution. But again, don't worry too much about that. It's not going to make any difference whatsoever, and your answer will be more accurate. So again, don't worry too much about where all the numbers come from. You'll follow these through the questions later on. It'll be pretty clear where all the numbers actually come from. If you're not sure now, this is about kind of how to use the sheet, how to do your exam technique. Again, we don't unfortunately have time to get involved in the whole thing. The gain to Lala shareholders. And what is the gain to Lala shareholders? Well, we have the 228, which we have calculated above somewhere. Well, there we go. Sorry, it's just there. We take away the $2 per share that we have as the original value. We divide it by the $2 per share. So again, this isn't really a really major part of the calculations as such. What you're setting yourself up for here doing these percentages is getting yourself ready also for your when we do the word processor and we do the longer form answers. That's the main thing here. Okay. You'll be glad to know we're coming to the end of this question. I'll just check in with any questions that you have. For value attributable, valuable attributable equity is okay if I minus it with debt 4 million instead of multiplying with equity, because Neural, I think there's when you get to some of these calculations, you can divide some things or you can multiply by something else and you get the same answer. Again, once you get the same answer, it's fine. Everybody has their own techniques, to be quite honest. The examiner is not going to overly pay attention to how you got there. If you get there, they're only going to pay more attention if you didn't get there, if that makes sense. So yeah, but if you have your way of doing a calculation and it's still the same way, that's fine. Just because it's different to mine, if your path is slightly different, but we get to the same destination, we're all very happy with that. So don't worry about that. Okay, so just the last couple of pieces on this one. And first of all, we're going to calculate on the combined company. And this is related to the cash payment. And we're going to look at the market value of the equity before the acquisition. And we already have the market value of the equity before acquisition. And this is up here somewhere. It's the 2402. Again, it's handy just to keep these down here. The market value of the debt before acquisition. Now, the market value of the debt before acquisition. Well, what do we know? Well, we actually know that the debt to equity ratio is 40 to 60. So we know that if we say equals 40 divided by 60 multiplied by the 2402, we get 1601. So because we know that the ratio is 40 to 60, we know that the market value of the debt is 40 and the market value of the equity is 60. So that's all we're doing there. We're using the equity to get a market value of the debt. And certainly a good estimate of the market value of the debt. Obviously, you don't know always in exact terms. Now, and again, these are combining all of the answers we already have into just getting yourself ready for your calculation. Now, the combined company, the market value of the equity, and we know that the combined company of the market value of the equity is the 2933. And again, it's just, you'll get used to this, and I'm just kind of doing it quite, if I can find the number. If I can't, I'll just type it in now. But the more you can, so I'm not delaying it today, but the more you can kind of get used to doing this, the more you can, I'm just going to put the number in here. We've already calculated it. And the market value of the debt then is, we've already calculated these in the questions. So we know it's the 1601. I'll just put these in for now, 1601.7. We already know that the 1320, and we know we're keeping the 400 million. So equal sign. And again, you can, the market value of debt is 3.3 billion. You can go back and look after that a little bit later on. Okay. Now, it's good to know, just for the calculation, the percentage of, you can also calculate the percentage of debt to equity here, because it's going to change when different actions are taken. So obviously we know that 100% minus that. And again, this is going to come in useful for your calculations or for your commentary a little bit later on. And then the combined company share for share value is 4253. We've already calculated that. And then we know the combined company is 1601.7 for the debt. We also know it's the 400 million, because we're not getting extra debt in this case, because we are issuing share for share. And then the great thing you can do here is you can just copy these formulas and you can bring them down here and they will calculate the same thing again. And obviously you can put it up here, but it should be 60-40 or we've done something wrong. So again, this is just really useful summaries for what we're going to do with the commentary now. So that's it. When I say that's it, that's all the calculations you need to do in order to get ready for your full commentary in here. Okay. This takes practice, and it takes a lot of practice, and it takes effort, and it doesn't come naturally, and it's a mixture of understanding the content and being able to apply your knowledge. And as you can see, memory plays a very small part in this question. So first of all, now let's start populating some of our answers. And I'm definitely going to take a shortcut in this one, and I'm just going to show you my solutions, and we will just go through them then. So let's have a look at the first part of the question. First, we're going to look at the factors to consider. Okay. So what are the factors to consider? Well, first of all, what are the numbers? And again, when you copy things into the Excel or into this, it doesn't format it. So there's a few numbers that we actually looked at here, isn't there? There's the additional value of the acquisition to the demerger. There's the cash payments. So if we just tidy these up a little bit. Okay, so if we look at the demerger and we look at our numbers here, what's the additional value created by for the shareholders? And we have all of this information provided here. So in our appendix 2, we have looked at the additional value here, and it's 17.72%. Again, it's a little bit different in the question, but don't worry about that. So for the demerger, the additional value of Cowa shareholders is 17.2%. For the cash payment, and again, we just go to our cash offer, the additional was 22% and 10%. Again, you can decide whether to put in. So Cowa's, the additional benefit for Cowa shareholders was 10%. The additional value was 22%. And you can decide whether to put in whole numbers or decimal places. It really, really doesn't matter. And the share for share, which we've also done. And for Cowa shareholders, it was let's say 14%. And for Lala shareholders, it was 14%. And for Cowa shareholders, it was 27%. So that means that you're just saying, okay, well, here's the factors to consider. Well, the factors to consider start off with saying, well, what have we ended up with through all our calculations? And it's not really as straightforward as you would think. So you don't kind of go, well, the highest is 27%, so we automatically go for that. That's what you're being asked to do now. You're being asked to discuss that. So the share for share exchange gives higher return compared to a demerger. So it's the best one for the Cowa shareholders. Okay, I'm just going to create my paragraphs here. Although this is not the best value for Lala shareholders, the company value would still increase, and so will the value of the shares. They would likely vote in favor. So again, what we're saying is that Lala shareholders could get 22% here, and they only get 14% here. But Cowa shareholders are more likely to go for that option. And at the end of the day, they're getting hold of the company, and they're also increasing their equity by 14%, because it's very unlikely if they went for that one, even though it's in their benefit, they will get the company. So again, it's just, you are not saying, oh, the value is 27%. Don't repeat this. You've already written this down. We all know what the percentages are in this case. You've mentioned them twice. What you're doing is you're adding value to this, okay? So what's the next point? However, the following needs to be considered. So what are the points that we actually need to consider now that are important? And I'm just breaking up these for you. So the value estimates are based on predicted variables and likely that the actuals will be different. So it's recommended that Lala undertake a sensitivity analysis. So yes, we've built all these numbers, but we are guessing into the future. So what if they're not true? So what if the profitability in the case wasn't true? What if our cash flows wasn't true? So what we're suggesting here is that Lala should do some sensitivity analysis and run the numbers in a few different ways. Remember, you don't have to explain what a sensitivity analysis here is. You don't have to go into too much detail. None of that is required. All you're doing is saying, look, I would recommend that you possibly think about a sensitivity analysis. Okay. Now, what's our next point? Cowa shareholders have three main areas to consider. First, they will become part of a larger company, owning about 36% of the share capital, but they will be minority shareholders and may not feel part of the decisions being made. Operating alone may be seen as the best option to control their own strategy. for this competition against Bunnyco. That's it. It's hard. Being part of a bigger company, they lose that autonomy, they lose that ability to run their own company. What's my second point? There's no certainty about the 26% or 27% additional value. As Lala is a private company, they may have kept information out of discussions that would impact the valuation. Again, you're not describing valuations. You're not going into any great detail. You're just raising concerns. Third, how do Kawa shareholders exit a private company like Lala? Lala may consider a partial listing to give flexibility to the shareholders, but the Lala shareholders may be worried about the influence that Kawa shareholders might have on the company by owning 36% and be worried that they can't control all of the strategy. So it's funny, they both worry about not controlling all of the strategy. And you're looking at it from both points. So a point for Kawa is the same as the point for Lala. It's just the opposite. Kawa are worried they don't have enough control, whereas the board of Lala worry that they have too much control. Because that's the type of thing you're giving advice on. Yeah, you've done most of the work over here. The key percentages and then the key points. The factors to be considered. That's it. You've done all the hard work with your calculations. Don't make life harder for yourself. The next thing that you're asked for was the capital structure changes. Okay. So let's have a look at what the capital, first of all, what would the capital structure be like? So we know what the capital structure is, and we underline that. And first of all, we kind of go, okay, well, what is the capital structure? And again, it's a bit old-fashioned. You have to use your space bars for getting across. But these are the percentages that we've calculated up here. So let's say that we know, sorry, these are the wrong place. I'm not going to worry about that line stretching across. It's not worth fixing. Okay, so what was the original? Well, we know the original was 60-40. And again, this is just, so what happens in a report is that you write a report and then the appendices show all the calculations. Some board members will be interested in the calculations. Some board members will be happy with the report. What you're doing is you're capturing all the important information in the report. And if they'd like to validate the numbers, well, they're more than happy to go ahead. Now we can round this down. The equity is 47% and 53%. And after all your hard work, this is all that they might care about. But that's just the reality. And then 68% and 32%. So these are the potential capital structure changes. So you have the cash payment for a combined company, you have the share for a combined company, and you've put in that these are calculated in your appendix 3. And you have the original, which were given in the question, which is capital structure. And then we just make a few quick comments on this. All we're doing is making a few quick comments. The cash payment means that the proportion and market value of the debt increases significantly and is greater than the market value of the equity, which we don't like. We like the equity being higher than the debt. This would risk financial distress and increase future borrowing costs, which you don't really see a long-term benefit for anybody. A share for share increases the portion of equity, which will likely reduce borrowing costs, but reduce the impact of the tax shield. So again, you're not mentioning the percentages. Again, they're there to be seen. You're adding value all the time to percentages. It would appear difficult for Lala to raise the necessary funds through debt. A partial listing is worth exploring, but there will be more public information disclosures required. Okay, so here are the changes. You've made 2 or 3 lines of comments about them, and then that's it. Again, you should not go into any more detail than that. And then finally, like any good book, it needs a good conclusion. Okay. I will just split them up a little bit. So what is our conclusion after all our hard work? The share for share is the best for Kawa shareholders and a good option for Lala as it increases the equity and gives scope for the additional debt financing. And we've already more or less said this up here. This 27% and 14% is good for all concerned. The cash offer may be better for CAWA for exiting in the future if they want to sell their shares, but is less valued than the demerger. Both cash offers would have an impact on Lala's debt position, and it's a negative impact, and we wouldn't like that. It is recommended that Lala should consider equity financing through a partial listing that would also enable CAWA shareholders to trade their shares, making it more appealing to them as well. So what are we saying here is there's no right answer. There's no perfect answer. This is a conclusion. This is what I think. You may all think differently, but once you have based it on the numbers calculated, your conclusion is fine. So again, I don't know how many of you have been practicing these reports, have done a mock exam. Maybe in the chat you'd put, have you written more than this when you've practiced the exams, less than this, or about the same? I'm just curious. It's just a random poll. If you want to put something in, I'm just curious about what you might think. So have you written more than this when you're practicing, less than this, or somewhat the same? But it's all simple and as best as you can, and keeping it simple and straightforward as you possibly can. Then you get 50 marks, just like that. So again, what you have to do time-wise is you have to really prepare yourself, and you really have to get into practicing. So we're going to take away these requirements. What you want to make sure is that the examiner knows what part of the question you're answering. So you're answering part A, the reason for the framework. The examiner knows here, you've already got, the examiner knows that you're looking at part B here, 2 very clear points. And then you got your report to the board of directors, and you can take away all of this. And that is your solution for this question. Okay, so have a think about that. Have a think about what you've learned from a structural perspective, from a presentation perspective, from using the Excel spreadsheet. And is really, really the most important thing I can say to you is that don't use pen and paper again when you're practicing. Honestly, the best thing you can do is just keep going in, access the blank template, just this blank template on the ACCA website, and keep practicing using this. Okay. If there's, I don't know whether anybody has any more questions on this, or if you have anything you want to add. Hopefully this question, although long and we spent a long time on it, is relatively straightforward and that you can follow what you need. But again, it's practicing. Another question that I would get asked a lot is, how many questions do I need to practice for the exam? And there are the prevailing response is you should practice as many questions as you can. And I would somewhat agree with that. But I would say you should practice as many questions as you can, but keep practicing the same ones. So if you have a bad technique and you practice 100 questions, you're going to practice 100 questions with a bad technique. So you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to improve, and you're not going to prove to yourself that you have improved. So what I would say between now and the exam is to concentrate on the last 4 exam papers that are available, so which would cover the last 2 years. And I would say you take a question like today. So let's say you sat down in the morning and you did this question again. It's 50 marks. You have, let's say, 90 minutes plus another 7 or 8 minutes added for planning. And you do this question and you compare it to a solution. Now, how did you do against the solution? How many marks would you get? And be really strict with yourself. How many marks would you get for that solution? And for that solution, what have you done different? Did you do it in time? If you didn't do it in time, what did you write more of? What did you overwrite? What took you time? Did it take you a really long time to figure out these calculations? If so, maybe go back and revise them. So if you didn't do well on the question when you marked it yourself, the common response is, oh yeah, I see where I went wrong. I won't make that mistake again. But your brain hasn't really taken that in. Your brain hasn't said, oh, of course I see where I went wrong. I'll remember that for you. It hasn't. The only way of making sure you've taken that in is maybe the next day or the week after doing that question again. So I would strongly recommend you stick to the last 3 or 4 exam papers available in ACCA, because the more recent ones are more relevant to you guys, and that you do them over and over again effectively. And you keep doing them till you've nailed them. Now, not remembered them, and please be careful that you haven't remembered how to do them, that you can do them naturally and you understand the process, because the questions won't be the same. So you just have to understand the process more, okay? Okay, so if there's no questions, we will move on to the next. So what I would like to do now is to give you a break from me talking about questions. I am going to share with you a presentation from ACCA, from the examining teams of all of, I'm going to share with you a presentation from all of the examining teams, right? That was released only a couple of days ago. And hopefully you can see the June 2021 Strategic Professional CPE feedback from examining team. If you can't, do let me know. But I will assume, unless I hear otherwise, that you can see it all. So this is the examining team looking at how students performed in the recent exams in June 2021 and combining the feedback. So yes, it is related to the Strategic Professional CPEs in total, but it is very relevant. It's only a couple of slides. So this is the strengths that they have noticed the students are getting better with because they're practicing. And we're all saying the same thing, to be quite honest. They're saying it too. And this was only released on, I think I only got this on Thursday or Friday. So good use of spreadsheets saves time and improves arithmetic accuracy. And I think we talked plenty about that today. The use of copy and paste of requirement into response area provides greater focus. So as I was saying, you start off, you copy your requirements in and you make sure you're answering those requirements all the time. Making a short plan using keywords to give structure. I showed you an example of that today. Clear cross-referencing between the word processor. They messed up on their spelling. See, even they make mistakes. Don't worry about them if you make them. And spreadsheet aspects of the response assist in providing professional responses. So again, we mentioned that when we put in a table that this answer was from Appendix 3 and so on. So you're just linking the two and making it easier for the examiner. Quality, planned and developed responses can be succinct. So succinct means shorter and bring more quality than bulk and volume. So again, 5 lines are better than 20 lines. You get more marks, it takes less time, you feel better, you will be more successful. Time saving should allow time to read and further improve their answer. Absolutely. Most candidate scripts can be read clearly and understood. And that's great. And it's because they're all online, I guess they don't have the handwriting issue anymore. Now we look at the weaknesses, and weaknesses are just feedback. And as I always say to students, if you're told you fail an exam, that's just feedback. That's just the examiner telling you, not that you're a failure, not that you'll never be a success. It's just saying right now you're not quite ready to progress. So, but what are those weaknesses? What are those things leading to that fail mark? And we're talking about here about the Strategic Professional CPE. So this is a tool. This is exam technique. This isn't about knowing this subject or that subject. Excessive use and copy and paste large areas of the question and adding a bland comment. And I think I mentioned that earlier, just repeating what's in a scenario in the question, and therefore there is an issue, happens so regularly and it just won't get you any marks, and the examiners are clever in that. Non-professional looking answers. What do non-professional looking answers? No gap between your points, lots of bullet points, no formatting, no headers, no bolding, simple things. And that's the poor use of the word and spreadsheet functionality. It's the formulas, it's the bolding, it's the neatness. Speedy but inaccurate typing. Now, again, it's not a spelling test, but if your typing is so off that it's actually difficult to understand what you're trying to say, that's where you will lose marks. So you won't lose marks for your grammar not being perfect or your spelling not being perfect, but where you will lose marks for is if it's affecting the interpretation of it. Excessively short responses. So saying company A, it's like saying, well, Kawa should just do this. Well, why should they do it? So if you haven't followed up every statement with a why, you're not developing your answers. And then there's a myriad of weaknesses explored in all three tools available. So students aren't practicing using it. Imagine. And I honestly think if you get using this tool can turn you from a 40 to a 60 to a 70, because you get so many marks from using this effectively. So what are the recommendations? And these are the recommendations from the examining teams of ACCA. So like if you're not following these recommendations, I don't know why, because it's the examiners telling you, if you do this better, you'll have more chance of being successful. Use the practice platform to do at least one exam in full and to time conditions. Whereas I'm saying you use the practice platform to do every question from here on into the exam under time conditions. After doing a technical review of answers, complete an analysis of how well the tools have been used and what could have been done better. If you have headers, if you've left the requirements in, just those simple things. Considering doing section A, question 1 in SBL, I would say question 1 in AFM is the same. A few times become more adept in the tools. Use the workspace for all homework and class questions if possible. I've already said that tons and tons of times. Use the word processing and spreadsheet tools at every opportunity. Like me, they are hammering at home. They're saying the same thing in different ways. And good exam technique is still essential, and it is essential. And I often wonder, is good exam technique better than knowledge? And I think they are even enough. What does good exam technique look like? Time. It's all about time. You all know that. You all said that in the poll earlier on. Allocate your time wisely. Set out the answers clearly. Be the marker's friend. Make them think the minute they see your answer, kind of go, oh, this is going to be a good exam paper. Constantly refer back to requirements, and how that keeps focus is copying the requirements into your spreadsheet or into your word processor. That's how it keeps requirements. And we had a question earlier about, can I write questions or can I write narrative solutions in Excel? Hopefully you've seen so far that would be a no. Show your workings, and your workings are in the formulas like I did, or they're written out. Fulfill any specific requests in the requirement. I would say fulfill only the specific requests in the requirement, and no more than that. And use the case material and apply to demonstrate synthesis and evaluation. Just give an informed opinion. Always refer back to your requirements and your case study. And good exam technique must prevail even within CBE. Good exam technique is the only way to pass ACCA. You could have all of the knowledge in the world, and without a good exam technique, you just won't be successful, unfortunately. So it is really, really important. And again, the more questions you practice, the more roadblocks you come up against, the more sections, the more subjects that come up that you're not familiar with. You are learning knowledge. You're picking up knowledge by doing questions as well. So it's not an either or. If you think about it, every question you practice, you're improving your exam technique and you're improving your knowledge. And they do go hand in hand. They really do go hand in hand. And I think it's important that you don't think that it's one or the other. It's actually this combined, if you want to say, it's this combined perfection of exam technique added together with knowledge and applying that knowledge. And that's where, and at this stage, you should be concentrating on exam questions and using the online platform. And if you do come across areas, and if there's any areas we cover today, and you thought, wow, I have no clue how to calculate that, I have no clue what that meant, then you go back and you study it again. But don't go back, don't spend time studying topics from now on in. Be very strict with yourself that you're practicing questions. And as you come across topics in questions that you really don't know about, or you haven't done well when you've practiced a question, and you go back and revise them then, but that's not the time to take out books and write lots of notes. It's about filling in the gap. It's about appreciating the parts that you didn't understand and concentrating on them. And that's really, really important. So just keep an eye on all those type of things. Okay, I think we have time for doing one more question. I'm just having a look here, seeing is there any better or worse one. I think what we might do is we might do question 2, which is a Robson question. And again, the only reason I'd like to do that one is because, again, it's a way of doing the, it's another way of using the spreadsheet function. The question 3 then is pretty straightforward from a spreadsheet perspective. It really is just listing all the numbers that you're given in the question. It's knowing a bit of knowledge. And there's more theory in question 3. So just be aware of that. Again, when you're looking at the theoretical answers or the narrative answers in questions 2 and 3 for ACCA, don't get put off by the amount of content they have there. Think about how many marks it's for and combine it to that. Compare that question 1 we did earlier. That part A and part B that we did earlier for question 1 should be a good guide for how much effort you need to make for an amount of marks. And if it's 10 marks instead of 5, well, you can double that amount of effort and double those amount of words. But certainly, if you took an ACCA solution and you tried to just write it out in 3 hours and 15 minutes, you probably wouldn't be able to do it. So don't try and replicate to those, and it can be very dangerous when you do that. Don't use ACCA answers as a guide. They're covering all possible solutions they can think of that students can get marks. There's a lot more than 100%. There's a lot more than 100% of marks available in an answer pack. So just use part A and part B of question 1 that we did earlier as a guide of effort for marks. That's what you should be targeting, not really, really long paragraphs, not over explaining things. Okay, so we're just going to open, and again, the word processor and spreadsheet opens like this. Again, it's your choice about how you do it, but whatever your choice is, you just go in and you get it ready to whatever specification you like. And you can see as I'm talking here, I'm just getting used to the way that I personally like it. But that's me. You can have your own layout, but you should have a layout. You should have a process that gets you ready for the question. The next thing you do is if we're going to have a look, and you all have a copy of the questions there, and you have 2 exhibits from Robson. And the first thing that I'm going to do for Robson is going to copy in the requirements. Because these, remember, these are going to be my foundation. These are going to be everything I need to be successful in this exam. I have to address all of these. And let's spend a bit of time looking at the requirements. I'm not too bothered whether we get all of this question answered or all of the detail answered, to be quite honest. This is about exam technique. And exam technique is a bit of answering the question, but it's how you plan it and how you put it together. So calculate the adjusted present value of the investment and recommend whether the project should be accepted or not. Now, that's a yes or no. Recommend whether the project should be accepted or not. Adjusted present value is a yes or no answer. It's a yes or no question, and it's a yes or no answer. So there's actually no, there's no narrative required for this, really. It's a one-liner. So in this case, and again, we answered the question earlier, it's effectively a yes or no. In this case, you wouldn't have to write anything in the word processor. You can write your one-liner, your couple of word solution in Excel. It's only when you get into real narrative that you have to use the word processor. And part B is interesting for 11 marks, okay? So discuss the factors and capital providers, excluding the bank, will consider before deciding whether or not to approve the funding decision for Robson's new investment. So you have a number of things to consider in that question. And what the factors that you have to consider are right across the board in this one. So you have shareholders, you have directors, and you have loan providers. And then you have to talk about the factors that will impact each one of those. So read those questions carefully. If you have a look at the PDF, I won't share.
I think you're not sharing your screen, is it?
Oh.
I think that you're not sharing your screen yet, because some of the students actually are.
I'm sorry. Oh, apologies.
It's okay.
I'm not sharing my screen yet. Sorry about that. So again, I've just put in the requirements here, just copied them in. I haven't gone any further than that. So if we look at the exhibits for Robson, and you have 2 exhibits for Robson, and again, you got the links earlier, so hopefully you have those PDFs. The first one then, they're a food manufacturer. The founding directors retain a significant minority shareholding in the company and are continue on the board. They've attained a listing. Their gearing ratio increased significantly above the sector average as a result of a poorly timed expansion strategy financed by debt mainly. Earnings became volatile and the debt burden triggered a decline. So you're really looking at kind of bad days for this company and financial distress. The board responded to these problems 5 years ago by pursuing a debt reduction turnaround strategy, which has been financed by a series of rights issues and asset disposals. Even though this strategy successfully reduced the gearing ratio, which is now equal to the industry average, the share price remains depressed due to competitive pressures within the industry. The credit rating has been downgraded again. The CEO has identified an opportunity to relocate the manufacturing plant and develop a state-of-the-art automated production line, which will reduce the cost base and a source of competitive advantage. So the finance director has given you free cash flows for a number of years. The investment cost is 120 million, which Robson's CEO proposes to finance as follows. And it's a mix of disposal of the existing plant, a rights issue, a subsidized loan, and another bank loan. The bank loan is repayable over 4 years, issue cost of 2%. And external, they're not allowable for corporation tax. Issue costs are payable out of cash reserves, and the finance director has asked you to ignore underwriting costs. And you've got some additional information that the current equity beta is 1.418 and the debt to equity ratio is 1 to 5 based on market values. The risk-free rate is 3% and the risk premium is 9%, and the CEO expects the business of the company to remain unchanged as a result of the investment, and your tax rate is 20%. So you've been asked to calculate the adjusted present value. So again, I have slightly got ahead earlier, and I've just built the kind of template that we will use for this question a little bit earlier, in order just for speed, so we can get as much done as possible. Okay, so this is the kind of layout that you should be well familiar with from an adjusted cash flow perspective. So we were given in the question a number of cash flows. We got to 20.9 and 20.6 and 28.7 and 104.6. Well, what is the cash flow for year 0? Well, you're also told in the question that the investment is 120 million. So it's a minus 120 million. Now, we're going to look at our discount factor, which is the ungeared cost of equity. Now, what are we looking at here? We could write out the formulas if you want. If you look in the solution, they're all written out. I'm not too worried about writing out all of the formulas. To be quite honest, I don't see the value of it. So first of all, what we're going to do, and you can label this and do things like this later on and follow this. I'm just going to show you the calculations for now because we're running out of time a little bit. The equity beta is 1.418, and we're told that from the question. We are also told that the cost of the equity to gearing, or the gearing ratio, is 1 to 5. So we are going to multiply that by 5 over, and we're going to 5 plus. And what are we adding to the 5? We're adding the 1 by 0.08. So we're going to take into account the tax shield that we have on this. Well, I don't know why that happened. Let's try that again. The ACCA system might have finally given up on me. I have too many brackets in here. Okay. That's given us an answer of 1.4, which doesn't tally with the answer that we should have got. Just bear with me for 1 second. And again, this is the, don't be too worried about this on the day. So 5 plus 1 by 0.08. I just want to double check that their solution is actually correct. Okay. I actually think, strangely enough, there might be a problem with the ACCA solution. Okay, so we're going to use my number here. I think actually that's the correct number. I think there might be a small error in the ACCA solution, but again, it doesn't matter. It'll still achieve what we wanted to achieve. Now we're going to look at the overall cost of equity. So we know what the risk-free rate is because the risk-free rate was given to us in the question. So the risk-free rate is 3%. And we have the annual interest rate, or sorry, I'm losing my concentration. We have the cost of that we've already calculated. So we're going to use this 1.4 again, trying to use it. We're going to multiply that by the 90%. And that 90% is given in, or sorry, the 9% is given in the question as the risk premium. And we're going to get an answer of 15.6%. So again, the question has, and you can all check this later, don't worry about that, but it's not important. So we're just going to use a discount factor of 15.56%. So again, you can look at that. You can use 15 or you can use 16. That's okay. You can round it down. There's no issues with that. Or we can just use the 1 divided by 1 plus that. And that will give us our discount factor. So our discount factor for that one is the 0.86. And that's 1 divided by 1.1556 squared, which is 0.7488. .6480. Somebody would say this is not good TV. 1 divided by 1.1556 to the power of 3. Sorry, that's and then 1 divided by 1.1556. So this is an example when things don't go your way. Okay, and then that's just 1. So the present value is obviously the 120. And then it is, these are all just multiplied by the discount factor. Okay, and you can tidy all those up if you wish with the formula here. And then our base case net present value is the sum of all of these added together. Which is a minus 9.24. So it's a slightly different answer than what you get in what ACCA have in their solution, but the direction, they're still both negative, so they still say the same thing. So what is the answer? Well, it should be rejected as it is negative. That's all you have to say. You don't have to explain anything. You don't have to put in anything else. You don't have to explain why it's negative. You don't have to say the pluses and minuses of net present value. None of that information has to be provided. Okay, I'm just looking at some questions. Do we need to mention anything if we were using Excel function for, that was earlier, is it? Could you share any tips on how to handle too much information in a question, especially for question 1? I think, Neural, the tips for too much information in question 1 is to go exhibit by exhibit and to tie down what part of the question and what part of the exhibit and answer that part of the question with the exhibit in mind. That's the only way I could do that. I'm not sharing. Thank you, Tan, I think. This is the issue I face in the calculation spreadsheet, so I'm not the one here. Yeah, I think that, again, I might have done that calculation wrong or something, but yeah, it is an issue that you face doing calculations, but that's not a reason why you should ever think about not using the spreadsheet. So I would work through your difficulties with a spreadsheet, and it will be difficult, but you will get your benefit. And as I said, the examining team have done a lot of work on those benefits. They've done a lot of work. They have analyzed students who are doing really well in exams and students who are not doing well in the exams. And that feedback I showed you earlier is really based on that. So although it might seem harder now, there's a reason why those students are becoming, are being more successful, to be quite honest. Okay, so the base case net present value is not good and it should be rejected. Then we look at the issue costs. And what are the issue costs for this? So when we look at issue costs, we're looking at the 100 million, first of all. And you can put it in here if it's 100 million of the loan. Or for the, so there's 2% issue cost based on all of the debt being raised, or all of the non disposal being raised. So it's 100 million multiplied by 2%. Again, we'll just do the calculation here. Oh, equals and pluses. And we know that's 2 million. Again, you can put in 2 million, or you can put in, if we want to put in here, we can put in the full 100 million and you get your 2 million. It's really up to you. Again, there's no examiner going to penalize you for that. But I think the other way is better. We can put in the, keep it 2000 and then we'll do it that way. So we know what the issue costs are, 2000 here. The tax shield on the subsidized loan now. So if we move on to the tax shield on the subsidized loan. So the subsidized loan is 3.5% and it's for 4 years. And so then you're looking at an annuity factor and you have that in your tables, or you can work it out in your calculator. It's 9% for 4 years is what the bank loan is. So your annuity factor is 3.240. So we'll just accept that for now. We won't go any more complicated than that. So if your annuity factor is 3.240, what you have in your calculation is you've got your 40 million loan. Okay, so you have your 40 million loan. You have that multiplied by 0.035, which is your 3.5% that you're getting on the interest rate. You multiply that by your 0.2, which is the savings on your tax rate or your tax shield, and you multiply that by 3.240. We can add a few zeros to this to keep the same. So it's 907,000. So again, our tax shield on our loan is 907 million. Or 907,000, and this is obviously a negative because they're issued costs, not savings. Now we also have our tax shield on our bank loan. This is a little bit more complicated, but it's good to have a look at how do we look at a reducing balance loan? Okay, so what is, first of all, how do you calculate the annual repayment on a loan? Well, our loan is 50 million, which is the 9% annual interest rate bank loan. So we're borrowing 50 million. We have already know what our annuity factor is of 3.24. So equals. So our annual repayment is 15,432, which is more what I was expecting. So it's $15,432. Okay. Now, so we're looking at a reducing balance calculation. So we start off with our 50 million in here. And again, another thing that you can do here is you can highlight a whole section, and you can pull down and you can say, okay, I want everything with no decimal places or 2 decimal places. But let's go no decimal places for the moment. So the interest at 9%. So we're going to take this 50 million multiplied by 9%. And the interest, and what we can do here is we can drag that across. And it'll be 0 now, but when we populate that, they will all populate. And what's our repayment? Well, we know we're paying 15 million in cash. And we know that payment is the same every single period because we're paying it off in equal installments. So it's this. And now what our closing balance is, it's the sum of those numbers. So it's the 50 million. We add 4.5 million for interest, but we reduce it by the payment of 15 million. And at the end of the year, we owe 39 million. Okay. Now that 39 million becomes the opening balance. We drag this across. And we drag that across. And that should come to virtually 0. It won't come to exactly 0, but that is definitely close enough. So remember, your closing balance becomes your following period's opening balance. Your formula in here, that means it adjusts to that number. So that reduces as your balance reduces. Your repayment stays the same, and you should come back to more or less 0. Okay. Then you have your tax relief on your interest. So your interest is that, your tax relief is 20%. So you have 900. And again, obviously that tax relief decreases because your interest rates or your interest payments are decreasing. You have your discount factor of 9%. So it is 0.91. Oh, they nicely give them to us in the solution this time. So 0.917, 0.842, 0.772, 0.708. And again, even if you have, and you can expand these out to 2 decimal places or multi-decimal places, but even if you only see 1, it'll still calculate a fraction below. And again, it's the 900 multiplied by that. Okay, and then your total present value is the sum. So you were getting a present value benefit of 1975 million onto your, because of the tax shield on the bank loan. And again, just because you're profitable, the tax shield is that you're offsetting your interest against your income before you pay your tax. So again, we have our little table that we built up here. So the tax shield on the bank loan up there. And then finally, we'll have a look at the subsidy benefit. So the subsidy benefit is we have a loan of 40 million. Okay. So we start off with our 40 million loan. We then multiply that by the 9%, which is the loan interest rate minus the subsidized rate, because it's how much are we benefiting from it. So by 0.09, or you can put in the 9% minus 0.035. Multiply that by 0.8, which is the after-tax rate. Multiply that by the annuity factor, and you'll get 5 million. So basically what we're saying here is that because of the subsidy, the amount of interest that you're being saved, if you think about the interest here for the question above, is 4.5 million just for the year, you're basically paying a third of that interest every year. So the savings on that are over 5 million. And then you take the sum of those. And you get 6,585. So what does that 6,585 tell you? It tells you that now, this is where the answer will differ. And again, it might be my calculation, so you can check it. But basically, the recommendation is adding the 9 million up here, which we have to multiply by 1,000 just to compare, plus 6,585. If I did that right. So it's still a negative, so we'd still say no. The answer would say yes. So just have a look at that formula when you're doing it later, but it doesn't really, whatever, if we just put those rates in there, it will change. So again, just have a look at that gearing formula a little bit later. I don't want to spend too much time trying to fix that right now. But I actually think it's, yeah, one. Okay, that's not it either. Okay, I won't mess around with that now. But again, that's the idea, and that's all it is. And basically, you're saying here, when you get to this answer of the 2.658 or whatever that answer is, if it's still a negative, it's still rejected. If it's a positive, it's accepted. And you can just write rejected or accepted. Reject as it's negative, positive, or accept as it's positive. And that's all you need for that solution. Okay. Okay, so we're getting to that stage that I'm going to show you quickly the answer for part B of this, and I'm just going to show you quickly the ACCA solutions that you have, and I'll share the screen in a second. And then we're close to finishing up. So anybody who has any questions about AFM, study technique, needs any advice, even if it's outside of question practice, if there's any questions that you have on anything, even to do an ACCA exams or anything in general, please do ask me now, and I will try my best to help you. But let me one more time just share, and remember to share my screen this time. And we're just going to have a quick look at the solutions for the exam. And this is how the second part looked. And again, I'm only actually interested in the layout. I'm not going to even go through some of the content with you, but I'm just interested in the layout, right? See how, okay. So the factors each capital provider might consider, that's in the requirements. Who are the providers? Well, external shareholders through the rights issues, the founding directors through the subsidized loan or subsidized loan provider, and the founding directors. You've been told to exclude the bank. So you don't talk about the 9% bank loan. And again, be careful of that. Some people would end up talking about the bank because you're just going through the list. You've been told not to talk about the bank. And all you're doing there is making 2 or 3 points for each one. Some are slightly longer than each other, but it's just 2 or 3 points for each one. Okay, so what do the external shareholders have to concern themselves about? What do the founding directors have to concern them about? And what do the loan providers have to concern themselves about? Now that question was quite a few marks. If we go back to the requirements, it was 11 marks. So again, you're probably saying, well, the founding directors might be 2 or 3, and the external shareholders might be 4 each because of their size. But again, just make it simple for yourself. Make sure you're answering enough content to get yourself 3 marks for each of the areas. And if you add, I think, a little bit more content, but again, don't be aiming for 11 out of 11 or 14 out of 14 every time. Everybody will have different typing speeds. Everybody will have different subjects that they prefer. So aim for that 9 out of 11. Make your life simple. Of course, you'd love to get first in the world and first in your country or without, if you would. I've never been personally a fan of the prize winning mentality. I've often thought that those people who pass their exams should get the same rewards as those people who passed them with 99%. It doesn't make you a good accountant, and it won't make you a better accountant just because you get a higher mark in an exam, believe me. So it's not about that. It's not about competing. It's not about getting your results. Believe me, my results in ACCA weren't the most flattering results you'll ever get, but I have the same qualification as any other ACCA member right now. So it's not about how much you pass by, it's about passing. And it's getting that 8 or 9 out of 11, it's getting that 10 or 11 marks out of 14 and moving on. And if you can hit that mark a number of times, it'll effectively guarantee you a pass, even if there's one section that goes badly. And that's the way you should be thinking. I have 10 marks, I have 18 minutes. How do I nail 7 or 8 marks and I move on? If I happen to get 10, great. But how do I nail 7 or 8 and move on? That's what I should be targeting all of the time. And don't be looking for every single mark. There's also, I guess it's a belief among people who correct exam papers in general. And there's also this feeling that you will get half, or you will get most of the marks in a question, in a solution you give, in the first half of the time that you spend on it. So if you can imagine this question here that's on the screen now, or this solution that's on the screen now, and if you had your 3 sections already laid out, in the first part of the time you put what you know about the shareholders, what you know about the directors, and what you know about the loan providers. It mightn't be enough to get 100%, but it might be enough to get 50%. But you get that part really quickly. And then you add little bits that take longer. You're kind of rattling around in your head and you're saying, oh, what can I find? What's relevant? What's really good for me here? Okay. And the biggest temptation is, oh, I know everything about this. I'm an expert in this area. I remember everything I studied on it. I've done an exam that's nearly the same as it. And you write double the amount. You will still only get 11 marks. But you will lose so many marks by running out of time on other questions. You're much better off getting 9 out of 11 and doing it in time, or 8 out of 11. Believe me, if I got 8 out of 11 or 7 out of every 10, you're getting a 70% pass rate. You'll walk out of the exam really, really happy with yourself and pretty sure you're going to get a decent result and a decent mark. So that's the way you should be thinking, and that's strategy. So think of all the subjects you're doing. Think of all the work you've done to get to ACCA so far, different subjects. It's just a strategy. Passing an exam is strategic. Yes, you have to have knowledge and you have to have exam technique and you have to look after the time, but it's a strategic approach. You don't have to get 100% to pass. You only have to get 50% to pass. So you aim for 7 out of 10. If you can aim for a good 7 out of 10 mark, and sometimes you might get 5 or 6, but sometimes you get 8 or 9. And what you're aiming for is just a steady 7 out of 10 to get within the time, and sometimes even quicker than the time available, and move on. And that should be your target for your exams. And don't be putting yourselves under any more pressure than that. And if you gain time later in the exam, you can come back and add more, and you can get your 8 or 9. But get your 7 and move on. Get your 7 and move on, and keep doing that approach. Make sure to watch your time. And what you'll find is if you practice enough, and if you really stress yourself out with time in your practice, it'll come naturally in exam. You'll build up, your brain will build up this routine. It will just know. It will just sense that it's too long. And especially with the computerized exams now, you can just go in, and if you've got time later on, you can just create a space and keep on writing. Where it was with paper, it was like leave an extra page, it was very messy. But now the examiner doesn't know what you've written at the beginning or the end of the exam. But keep an eye on your layout and don't use bullet points. So as well, I really do think that's important. So I'm just going to have a look now and see. I will not share screen now. And if anybody has any questions that they want to ask, why? Oh, this is the, oh, it's a very, it's not the type of question I expected, Ashvin, but okay. Why did I choose to do ACCA? Oh, it's a long time now, Ashvin. I don't know. I can't kind of remember. Well, I knew I wanted to be an accountant, And at the time, there would have been ACCA, SEMA, and I could have done chartered in Ireland. I didn't want to do that. Honestly, at the time, I chose ACCA because it was slightly the hardest, but because it was harder, it was better recognized. So I felt that it was going to be a harder exam to do and more challenging. But I felt that having the designation of ACCA would benefit me longer. It gave me more mobility. Like at the end of the day, getting that ACCA name or badge or whatever you want to call it, certificate, and being able to put those letters after your name opens a lot of doors. There's no doubt about it, because like, you know how hard you have to work. The people who are interviewing know how hard you have to work. They very rarely check your accounting skills. There's an assumption that you're a well-rounded, well-prepared individual with certainly good theoretical experience, and that you've been pushed to your limits. And the past ACCA, they're looking for the skills that are not necessarily in an exam. You've had to show resilience. You've had to show kind of strategic nous, if you want to call it that. So there's all of these different things that you've had to show in your exam that an employer is looking for, not just that you can do it in net present value or just the present value cash flow, or not just because you know how debt might affect an external shareholder. It's not just that. It is the skills that are not written in the syllabus that are important. And that's what the exams do. And as challenging as they are, and AFM is a hard paper, the questions are very detailed. They really do test a lot of the syllabus. They're very challenging. And you'd never, ever be faced with a real life scenario that you're given 3 hours to answer such a complicated question. That just doesn't happen. But I guess that's why I chose it, because it was harder. And you do have to make an effort, and it is an awful lot of work. But I can honestly say I've had a very varied career, and it's because of ACCA, and it's come full circle now talking to you guys this morning about ACCA. But it's given me options and a very varied career, and who knows what I'll do next. But having ACCA has also always benefited whatever steps I wanted to take. So I sound like a salesperson for ACCA, but I do genuinely believe it. But I also genuinely believe your exams are much harder than my exams were, and that the level of exams have gone up a lot in the last few years, and they're probably as difficult as they ever have been. But that is the challenge that you face, and I think you're all well able to overcome it. But there's no shortcuts. There's no guessing what's coming up. There's no easy way out. There's no luck involved. It's hard work and good exam technique, and you will pass ACCA exams, and you will pass every ACCA exam. There's no mystery to them. There's no trick to them. And honestly, every ACCA examiner wants to pass you. When they open up that first page or open up your spreadsheet for the first time, they want to pass you. They're looking for reasons to pass you, not for reasons to fail you. They really, really are. Your job is to give them every reason in the world to pass. So you have 4 weeks left. It's 4 weeks from Monday, if I'm not mistaken, is the 6th. And I think AFM is Thursday. I always get confused, but AFM is Thursday, I think, or Friday. And this is the 4 weeks that matter. This is the 4 weeks that will make all the difference. Forget about what you've done to this point. The next 4 weeks make all the difference. There's lots of things that you can say, I didn't study hard enough, or I studied too hard, or I don't know everything, or I know less than I thought. You can give yourself lots of excuses, but this is the 4 weeks that matter. This is when it's down to you. You've attended classes, you're here today, you're maybe watching me online, wondering what I'm talking about, but this is the 4 weeks that matter. This is what turns around. This is the hard miles that makes your race easier. And what you wanted to go in, you want to come out of an ACCA exam feeling that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. That I was nearly so prepared that it was actually nearly easy. You want to feel that the practice was harder than the actual exam, because then you've done the practice right. And that's what you should be targeting. Make your practice harder than the exam, because the exam will come with added pressure and stress, and the whole thing that it's an exam, and setting up your computer or going to a venue or wherever you're sitting at. So they will happen on the day. You can't control them. You can't do anything about them. You just move on from them. But you can certainly make that day easier by putting yourself under pressure now, and get used to that feeling of being under pressure, that it doesn't register anymore, that you're just You've just learned that it is, and it's the best way for you to be successful. And you might find that you excel when you're put under pressure, but the day of the exam isn't to find out if that's the day you excel under pressure. Now is the time to find out. And if you don't, now is the time to fix that and get yourself used to it. So Ashwin, that was a very long answer to a very simple question, and I went off on a tangent, but hopefully that helped. If there's no other questions, I'll let Joanne come back in and maybe say best of luck to you all in your exams. So.
Yeah, thanks, Alan, for sharing your valuable insights. Well, I do actually have a quote that I would like to share with all of you today, and something for you to ponder upon. It's this: mastery comes from repetition, immersion, and hypnosis. It's all about doing something over and over and over again, fully immersing yourself in it and going into your subconscious mind that it becomes a habit. So keep practicing using the right exam technique. All right. So we hope you guys actually learned a lot in the session with Alan. So good luck in your study. And just for information, everyone registered for the session will actually receive from ACCA this webinar recording in the email, so you can listen to it again. Now, Alan, do you want to say a few words to the students before we close the session?
Yeah, I think you're all more than capable of it, and don't let anybody think that you're not capable of passing an ACCA exam or an AFM exam. Forget about pass rates, forget about anything you hear. Like, close out all that noise, forget about anything anybody says. Give those 4 weeks, give yourself the best chance of passing over the next 4 weeks. It's down to you. It's really all up to you now. But I do wish you all the best of luck. And I'm sure you are all more than capable, probably more capable than I would be of taking the exam now. So I wish you all the best of luck, and I do hope it goes well.
Yes, thank you. And goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.